Good evening. I'm opening the meeting of the Board of Architectural Review and Historic Preservation for January 28, 2019. That being said, we are closing for executive session to discuss legal matters, and we'll return at 7 for the public meeting.
Need a motion.
I make a motion that we close the public hearing for executive session.
Second that?
Aye.
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 So I'm making a motion to close our executive session and open the public portion of this hearing of the Board of Architectural Review and Historic Preservation.
Second?
Aye.
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 Good evening. My name is Susan Stevenson, and I'm the chair of the Board of Architectural Review and Historic Preservation. Calling this meeting to order. First, I'd like to introduce the panel. Rob Coburn, Jeff Broadleib, Curtis Highsmith, Wayne Bruin is our counsel tonight, Charles Styler is the videographer, and Antoinette Edwards is the recording secretary. Before we get started, I'd like to ask you that if you have any materials for presentation, please put them on the table in front and have them facing the board so the videographer can pick up the information. Secondly, I'd like to make it clear that I want everyone here to act and speak with civility, both the board members, the public, anyone here. And all materials and dialogue must be truthful. With that being said, let's move ahead.
Can I just ask if there's an extra agenda?
Oh, yes. Hang on here. Here you go. I got one.
Did you have some on the table there?
I had an extra, there was one on, I had
Oh, and
printed,
I have one.
I printed one out before I came. All right.
I have one copy.
The minutes for January 14th, 2019, we'll have to deal with that next time. And also, there are no signs, which is a miracle. Moving ahead, written decisions, there's one, Christopher Moore, 509 First Neck Lane, constructs two-story addition to the existing dwelling. Has everyone read the written decision?
Yes, second.
Do I have a motion to approve?
I make a motion that we
Or we
approve.
just vote on it, right?
I would make a motion that we accept the written decision of council regarding the application of Christopher Moore at 509 First Neck Lane.
Second that.
Aye.
Aye.
No. Okay, aye. Motion passes.
There we go. Thank you.
Next, public hearings, non-historic. Henry and,
Actually,
Driveway gates?
driveway gates. Ocean Play LLC, 155 Wyandanch Lane.
Good evening. Please. Second. Good evening. My name is Paulo Ochoa. I'm here on behalf of Ocean Play. I was here on the meeting of October 22nd. The first set of gates that was originally proposed was rejected because there was not enough visibility. So we went ahead and redesigned a different set of gates. I think it is like 90% visibility. I hope this.
Looks nice.
Can you just describe the colors and the materials for us?
It's going to be constructed with clear cedar painted white.
And how tall are the posts,
The posts are
approximately?
about
I just didn't take
6 feet 1 inch.
Okay, fine.
And then there are lights on there.
Oh, there are lanterns on these?
Lanterns on the.
Do you have a picture?
The fixtures for the columns are,
No, the lamps.
Yes.
Everyone's always, and the,
they're going to be under LED under 10 volts. That's what the GC, Joe Roberto, has communicated me. I'm not in charge of any of the electrical work.
10, what's the wattage? I don't
Ten.
know.
10 watts.
10 watts,
Yeah.
but
LED.
LEDs.
It's a question of lumens to be
Yeah.
honest, but we don't have it in the code.
do you have a problem with it?
Do they, it's a little hard to tell.
Yeah, do you have
Does it
a-
shine out from the fixture entirely?
Looks like.
Through the fixture?
It's
on
gonna
the
shine
outside.
down. It's gonna shine down.
Well, it
But
has
it's
a
clear
little
glass,
candle.
right?
Yes. You know, we are hoping, I spoke to Joe, I tried to get as much information as I can for this meeting, but he said that I'll, you know, comply with the village, whatever you request or you suggest, I'll pass that information to the chief.
Well, it's no way for it to shine down since the candle's pointing up. Are the lenses frosted or are they transparent, clear,
Is the glass?
glass?
We can do frosted if that's,
I think if you did frosted, it would diminish a lot of the
Yes.
aftershine.
And if we had, whatever the LED is, the equivalent of a 25 watt or less incandescent
You said 10,
bulb.
which I,
yeah, that's what
hard to
think so.
believe.
Yeah.
You have a 10 watt.
It's the equivalent of a 40-watt bulb.
Well, that's too bright.
10 LED watts equals 40 watts equals 600 lumens.
So do we need to,
So then we would, because we would generally, Curtis, what, 25 watts is what
Yeah.
we usually do?
25.
Well, but with frosted, sorry, Curtis, with frosted, because that will reduce some of the apparent.
they're not going to
light.
want it frosted either, I can tell by looking at it.
My challenge is the applicant doesn't know.
Yeah, I agree.
Not that I want to hold you over to another meeting or anything, but if you're making certain assertions, and the approval is going to be the approval based on what you're stating today. If that changes, then you have to come back before the board
okay.
to make,
So
to
I
get it
don't think we
reapproved.
can approve it unless
We
you,
can if he's going to,
if you would
Agree
agree.
to some,
But is he-
A standard
is it
20
architect? Are you an architect?
I'm not an architect, I'm just building the gates.
Yeah, okay, no.
Joe Roberto is in charge,
We
he's the
can't do it
GC of the
then, can we?
project.
Well, but we can put in a restriction to
Yes.
put in a 25-watt incandescent frosted bulb.
or equivalent LED, but
Or
in
equivalent.
terms of the light, the
Doesn't have to be
lumens, the
frosted.
light production.
So-
A 25-watt bulb.
Okay.
Which would solve all the problems about lumens.
But a 25 watt LED can be
Yes,
very,
no,
very bright.
not, I don't
So-
actually think LEDs are good. I don't know. Honestly,
So you need more information for,
we need actually, if you're going to come back, a picture of the actual lantern that you usually get out of like a book where people pick out the lantern and then ask the supplier. And we would also need, and that would show the specification. And this village mostly wants the brightness to be 25 watts or less.
Or less.
Not LED. If it's LED, it's tiny, and I'm not even sure what their position is on LED. Do you know? Well, I don't know. They're supposed to have vetted it, but obviously something's gone awry.
all right.
We should probably say for the record, I'll say for the record for myself, I appreciate the redesign. It looks very
Yes.
handsome. And the transparency is nice, so that's very responsive.
Yeah.
We appreciate that. We could approve something subject to, but are you saying you want to see the light fixture in a tear sheet before we approve?
Well, it just seems like there are an awful lot of questions.
Concerned about the fixture, or are you concerned about the light?
Both.
Okay.
And if you see a picture, if they bring in a picture of the fixture,
It'll
it
shed
shows
light
the
on it.
specific, yes, it'll shed light on it. So I honestly think he can't really represent, we're putting him in a weird situation too.
Okay.
So I think, are you asking us to adjourn to the
We
next?
have to come back for the next,
Yes, we'll be seeing, could you?
next month,
Yes, the next
It'll be
meeting,
February 11th,
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
come back.
So just come back with more information on the
So-
The light is fixed,
We like what we're doing here.
25 watts or less, okay?
Right, and also, if you have a picture of
I'll make sure the
Actual-
electrician provides all the specs about
the, okay,
the light fixture.
fine, with lanterns. Sorry, sir,
No problem.
next time might be the charm. Thank you.
Have a good night, thank you.
Thank you.
Need a motion to
We
adjourn?
need a motion to adjourn till our next meeting.
I make a motion to accept the applicant's request to adjourn this application until the meeting of February 11th.
second that.
Aye.
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 Next, public meetings, non-historic. Henry and Bernadette Watkins, 44 Halsey Neck Lane. Oh, someone is here.
Madam Chairwoman, I need to recuse myself on this.
Wayne, one moment, please. It's complicated.
Diane Harold for Burr and Henry Watkins. We're responding to the comments that were made by the board at our last meeting. When you get the paperwork, you'll realize that we've made the changes requested by this board, and I'd like to run through them with you. I did a verbal on the top sheet, and I also provided you a site plan that's changed slightly, and then the drawings for the project.
Was this in the file, this letter?
No, it was not.
Okay.
Jackie did tell me to bring it in on Monday because we had to change the site plan.
Oh, okay. But it's helpful if we could actually see it before the meeting, but okay.
Well, I asked her and
Fine.
she said bring
I'm just telling
everything
you what,
because
it would be helpful if we could see it before the meeting.
I understand, and I did attempt
Okay,
to do
fine.
it.
Proceed,
But she
please.
said sometimes the board doesn't go through their whole file. So, I apologize, I'm sure you do, because you
Okay,
can't show
fine.
up, but well, I'll just run through it really quickly. Number one is we took the garage door off the front of the house, which is something that you really wanted us to do. I changed the bedroom and garage layout, so that worked out very nicely. We also set the sides of the garage building wing and also the study wing back 2 feet to give a little bit of variety on the front of the house. And you'll notice there's a 2-foot setback on both sides if you look at the front elevation. And because we did that, we had to change the window layout on the front of the house, but we think that it still works very well. If you look at page 5, you'll see, no, it's not page 5, it's
Where's the page?
page 4, sorry. That's what I should put in. Not only did I set the 2 wings back, but we also put pilasters on the corners of the house to break it up and emphasize that we did do that setback.
And I had an issue with the black asphalt roof. Is it,
You didn't mention that at the last meeting, so if you want to review it with me, it's a charcoal, it's not a dense black.
but it's asphalt?
Yes. It's the architectural series, the Timberline.
I also, now we have like a peak not over the front door. Isn't
There
that,
never was a peak over the front door.
there was a peak of the roof?
There was, last meeting, there was a peak over that, was in the middle of the house, yes.
Okay.
The 2 questions that the board brought up were the garage door and the flatness of the front of the house. We believe we've addressed both of those.
Sorry, the flatness on the front of the house.
That it was,
Some of the board members felt that the house was a little bit too flat, so we set the 2 wings, the lower wings, the lower roof lines, back 2 feet, break it up, and as I said, we put the pilasters on the corners to show that there's a little bit of distinction between the 2 surfaces.
the material that's on the roof now?
Spanish tile?
Wait.
Yeah,
Terracotta.
I'm calling it-
That's what I
yes,
thought. I was just
yes.
looking to confirm that.
But that was a totally different house, as we remember. We went through that.
I know.
Yes, I know.
And
We
so somewhat
discussed that.
regrettably, this
Yes, I
This board
understand.
member likes that particular house.
I understand.
And the terracotta. And my question would be, why the need to put an asphalt roof after going to such a extensive redoing the house to put on an asphalt as opposed to a wood or a slate roof?
A slate roof is prohibitive,
Yep.
so I wouldn't even consider that. A wood roof doesn't last as long as an asphalt roof.
So you're
And
saying
walls.
your concerns
It's
are
practicality.
practicals, not
The
architectural?
timberline are rated for the 130 miles per hour wind speed.
I understand.
So we're
They're all-
doing the
they're all
best we can,
practical
yes.
rather than architectural.
Yes, thank you. Now, I want to also point out, right behind my verbal description is the site plan. The building inspector asked me to bring that with me today because we did not have the survey revised until the board has approved the decisions that we've made, hopefully tonight. So the driveway is now located on the north side of the property, so it lines up and is able to get into the garage door, which is on the north side.
My concern is the roof. I find
On Halsey Neck Lane.
on Halsey Neck Lane, given that this house is going from a sort of, I don't know what, the orange
The
tone and the
Santa Fe.
terracotta and the Santa Fe to a stark white stucco with a dark asphalt roof. I appreciate the desire for the client to conserve money. On the other hand, probably in the scheme of things, the percentage of that expense, but it's not even an issue for us. Our issue and my concern is architectural. So
Understand.
I would ask that your applicant, your client, and you as the applicant consider either a slate roof or a wood roof.
A slate roof is totally out of the question.
Okay.
I mean, and personally, I don't think a wood roof goes with a stucco-style house. So I feel that we've done the best that we can for a house that's in the village.
How about terracotta then?
What, do you have a sample of the color of this stuff?
We did have a sample in the envelope. There was a sample of the roof color, yes. I brought that with me, and I believe that that was during
I
our
feel
first
if
meeting.
you lighten the roof, I think the black charcoal may be just a little too overwhelming. I think if you lighten the roof, if you're going to go with the asphalt,
I'd be
lighten the
willing
roof
to come
color,
in with
soften it a
a,
little bit. It may take away from some of the, especially from a stucco style.
We don't have that?
It'll
I
soften
did
it more
submit
than
it,
you
but
having a.
it doesn't matter. You know what black is, so.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, I do know what.
What are you suggesting, some sort of a mottled charcoal? Do I do a,
I-
You're leaning towards charcoal to dark to black?
Well, charcoal, I think.
well, I would like to resolve this. The owner is very fond of the black and white look of the house. I can go back to them and tell them that you will accept a charcoal, and we can bring in a sample
That'd be
next
great.
time.
I think
I'll
the
have her pick
softening
another
may
color.
resolve some of your issues with it being too heavy and it basically being
The big black
way too
asphalt roof is.
way too dark and
You're not
too
going to
heavy
see
for
much
the
of this roof, obviously, so,
It
but
is
I
Halsey-
understand the board's
it's Halsey
concern.
Neck
You're the
Lane.
architect?
Yes, I am.
What if she marks the plans just to state that it would be a
But then we
charcoal?
wouldn't charcoal, how, put any,
I mean, these are sketch plans, they're not even
Yeah.
color renderings.
well, that's a problem.
If she's
Well,
the architect in question,
there's no color.
if she were
Black
to
and
mark
white.
the plans to state they're going to be charcoal gray,
Well, this is what we have now, right?
This is what we have now, yes.
It's interesting how sometimes we are arbitrary in terms of how we apply certain standards. So typically, and it may be your style, But typically, we don't look at a house, whether it be on Halsey Neck or some of the lesser prominent streets, without there being a full color rendering in a 3D. And now here we're debating the roof, and we're going on hand drawings and willing to write it in. My request is to come back with a 3D color rendering with the roof and with the roof samples. I think that's a reasonable request. I'm sorry if it delays you 2 weeks, but,
I don't know if I can get
well,
a
then make it
sketch,
4
but we'll
weeks.
try, yeah. But
Okay.
I'll put scheduling me for the February meeting, the first one, and I'll speak to my
Come back with
clients.
color renderings, please, with
Well,
samples of the
excuse me,
material.
though, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're looking at a black and white house,
I
with charcoal
understand.
and white.
Yes.
So does this
And
mean
you're-
that you
and you-
want green trees and things like that? You want to see the grass? Or what other color
No.
am I involved with?
I
then?
understand, unless you're taking down trees.
No, we're not
Okay.
taking down
So
trees.
I'm happy to accept the landscaping as it is. What I'm looking for is the color rendering, which is something that is, I wouldn't say it's absolute in every one, but it's pretty standard. And so
But my question is, what color are you looking for? Because I don't know where there's
you're
any
the
other color.
architect and you're presenting it to us. I will look at whatever color you choose to present, but right now, all I see is black and white, and you're telling me to accept black and white, and I'm saying, give me a color rendering. You're asking me for my vote. I'm telling you what I'd like in order to give you my vote. Curtis has been very productive in providing some compromise
I understand
to
that,
something
and I
that you said
appreciate
was absolutely undoable. So please, accommodate us.
Well, truthfully, I wish the board had told me the last time, because we did come in with a black roof. So,
I believe
know.
that I mentioned the roof, but I don't
But
want to go
it
back.
doesn't
over
matter.
it.
no,
I don't
it doesn't
wanna
We're here
matter,
now.
because
So-
we're here.
All right.
I appreciate the input, because now I know what else to do. And I'll be here in 2 weeks.
And I'm sorry, this is a tedious process.
Oh, no, I understand the board's got...
It's a beautiful property on a beautiful
It
street.
is definitely. Okay, so I will look for a rendering for you, and hopefully that
Okay.
will make everybody, and thank you for suggesting that you would accept it.
Great.
Charlie.
Thanks, Diane.
I appreciate that, because I know you'd love to have a slate roof on this house.
May I make a comment and a quick question? First of all, I appreciate the responsiveness or the changes that were made in terms of the
Thank you.
setbacks and the change in the garage. I did have a couple questions. There is that EPDM roof on the back. You said you're going to put shingles on that, whatever shingles are decided.
I always
you're
do,
gonna put
oh,
on-
definitely, because we're looking out over that roof.
And then there's also a flat roof at the top, right? At the very top of the house?
No,
There's like.
The ridge line is a true ridge line?
Yes,
And
it is.
everything- Okay, sorry, I
definitely.
misunderstood.
It's, yes, it's a reverse gable on the roof, hip roofs.
And you don't need to put them back out, but maybe if you wouldn't mind just putting out page 4 again.
Sure.
The plan 4. Because I know you had to change the fenestration in order to get the setbacks and all of that. There's something about the spacing of the windows and doors on the first floor. Susan asked about the offset between the pediment there and the door.
Okay.
And I get that, but it feels to me like there is a window missing to the right of the front door, to the south of it, or that,
I didn't think there was enough space, but I'll put a window in if you want a
well,
window.
it
It's
just,
not a problem.
because the
Truthfully,
left windows
that's-
line up, and then
yes.
everything starts to
All
line
right.
up a little bit less.
That
It
is the
feels as
least
though-
of my worries. If you want a window,
Anyone
because
else
it's
share
in the
that
same
concern?
room.
That doesn't bother me because there's a window on the wing. I think
Yeah.
there's something out of balance because now the front porch got changed and
Front porch has always been the same way from last meeting.
Yeah.
I didn't change anything. If you want me to take off the reverse gable, I'd be more than happy to do that if you feel that's what's bothering you.
Pediment, reverse, yeah.
Yes?
well, it's going to hit your, I just feel like that would have been over the front. It's a little out of balance. I honestly don't know.
It's that there's not, it's an otherwise very formal and symmetrical house, and then the placement of the windows and the door, the center window and the door doesn't really line up with anything on the roof line, doesn't line up with the other windows, and it just has a slightly odd rhythm to it. Is there, would it be possible to relocate the front door slightly? Is that out of the realm of possibility?
That would be very difficult
Okay.
for us.
Don't
And
wanna
the
make it
windows are
difficult.
reflecting what the rooms are inside when you changed the floor plan.
Right.
We changed the windows. The
And
board
and
asked me to change
Understand.
So
the
what,
garage, so then I put some windows in the garage to balance, and actually 3 of the windows on the left side of the house are all in the garage, just to make the front look good. So I'm trying to work with the floor plan as well as,
Again, maybe you have 4 people on a panel, you get 4 opinions. Well, I may have had an issue with the roof. I don't have an issue with the design, and in fact, the little bit of asymmetry that exists on the front, actually, I think, I find it more eye-appealing.
it's more
It's
interesting.
staggered?
Yes.
Yeah, well, the top is balanced.
yeah, and the bottom
And the
isn't.
bottom, yeah, and it isn't, but it's, on the other hand, the scale of the door
Right,
and the
okay.
pediment is such that it offsets, so that when I look at it in its entirety, it makes sense to me. At least it looks nice.
Thank you.
How about you?
I don't have an
Cool.
issue with the application as proposed. Adding a window to the side,
I don't care.
absolutely going to be out of, it would be now you
Too
would be out
much.
of balance because now you're
Yeah.
adding another dimension, another window, and another window size.
I agree with that. Okay, so we're back to the roof material
And the color rendering.
And the color of
and
the...
and a rendering. Yes,
Okay.
that would be helpful, because
Right,
these have
I see.
been quite difficult to deal with, these plans. So are you asking us to adjourn to our next meeting?
Yes, please. Definitely.
For an adjournment?
Want to see you again.
So moved?
You want to do that? We did I move that we accept the applicant's request to adjourn to our next meeting.
Second?
Thank you.
Aye.
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 Next, Herman Lamison, 44 Hillcrest Avenue. Construct exterior alteration to existing dwelling.
Hello, everyone. I'm Andres Flores, and speaking for Southampton Engineering. I have
You flip that around?
Oh, sorry. I have some,
Yes, please.
Do you have affidavits of mailing and postage?
I do have in my hair. So we're proposing a couple of things to the existing house. We want to convert the existing garage into livable space. We're also raising that existing roof a foot and 2 inches to give more room to the inside. And we're changing a bunch of windows around the house just to fit them in with the new floor plan. And we're also adding a gable in the front just to give a little more presence to the main entrance.
So the cross-hatching is,
That's the existing, that's going to be removed or changed. On the second page is the proposed.
great if they understand it.
Shows all the demolition.
Yeah, okay. I looked at this a long time ago.
I have no objection to it. I think it's a nice use of, you're maintaining the house, you're contemporizing it, and you are adding some dimension to it on the roof line.
And the house is not getting bigger? Bigger on the footprint?
Because of the existing attached garage, we converted it into a room.
Well, but it's, are you making it bigger?
No, no.
Okay,
same,
that's
same.
what I'm asking you.
Yeah, same footprint.
Do you have any objections?
What would be the siding
We'll match the existing horizontal side.
and roof?
Same asphalt roof. Keep it in the same.
I have no issues.
That's fine. Rob?
I think it's generally really nice.
Yeah.
Simple. Is there a function to the reverse gable pediment that's being put over the front door?
We just want to give something, a little extra to the house because it's just plain.
Lint.
So that gives it a little more to the front entrance as well, sticks out.
I don't mind that.
I love the idea, I think it's a nice detail, and, but again, there's just a relational issue. It's not the same angle as the other roof, and it doesn't really line up directly over a door or over a window. So just curious as to what guided dimensions on that. I don't have a big issue. Does that bother anyone else? No.
And are there big plans of this exact,
Yeah, it's the same thing.
in the folder?
Yes.
Okay, just,
That's a side plan, I think, from
yeah, I'm worried about the paper. There's one. May or may not be. Are there two? Oh, maybe this is it. Okay, is it stamped? Good, great. Okay. Any public comment on this application? That
Can I just
case?
ask a question?
Yes.
What's the existing conditions of the building? Is it as represented here? Has there been any work done on it?
I have it here on the it's pretty much 2 bedrooms, and this is the existing garage. This is where we're converting it to a room.
Have you started construction? That's the question, obviously.
Oh, no.
That's a different one. By the way, I know where you're going. Yeah. So you haven't,
Taking away parking, that's not our issue.
No.
So the existing conditions are as represented in the plans?
Yes.
That was it.
okay. There- Is everyone good with this?
Yep.
Motion to approve?
I'll make a motion that we approve the application of Herman Lamison at 44 Hillcrest Avenue.
Second.
Aye.
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 Thank you very much.
Next application, Ocean Play LLC, 155 Wyandanch Lane, construct roof front door addition.
Good evening, Ron Milano, Architects Project. Here's some drawings in the mailing affidavit.
Can I already see this then?
That was for the gate.
Yes, that was the gate. Don't ask
Sorry.
me why it's broken up.
The affidavits are in.
Okay, great, thank you. And you know what, I'm passing this back because I can take the small ones, just make sure they're two stamped. Exactly. It's a thing over the door.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just changing the existing, which was,
Do you have a picture of the existing?
yes, hold on 1 second.
Be nice. Oh,
The existing door is inside, correct?
It was, so now we're proposing to make it flush with the front wall.
and you took out some like big cement pieces in the front? That's a big improvement.
Agreed.
Wow. And you took the trees out of the backing up your car?
okay.
You did a lot of things. I saw it.
Yeah.
So this is what you want this, oh, I see, you're making it simpler. That's very nice.
Show it to the public.
I think it's an improvement.
Face it toward us.
I was,
I was the original architect,
Oh,
but
excuse me.
unfortunately... No, unfortunately, who built it, they changed everything in the field. No, you could say it, believe me.
those cement things, I just didn't
Those
understand
weren't
it.
in the original plans.
Oh, great, don't tell me
So the person
anymore.
who bought them is making it right,
Okay, good, thank you.
and even better by doing this front covered porch. Small, not porch, but comes out a few feet from the
All right,
house.
do you have anyone have anything to say about it except that it's an improvement?
I guess that takes.
That was a meeting.
Well, okay,
So you're also adding shutters, is that right?
no.
No.
They had these palmetto, are you taking those out and
They're gone.
they're gone? I thought I just saw them the
Well,
other
they're going to
day.
be gone.
Okay, I walked down there,
So these
watch out.
shutters are coming off?
No, those does stay, that's as is.
Okay.
That's not proposed. All we're proposing now is this porch thing. We
Right,
just made
it's
the
all
house-
black, there's another black and white department here. All right, does anyone anyone from the public have anything to say about this application for the front porch modification? Do I have a motion to approve?
Do what you do, okay. I move that we accept the application
Ocean Play.
of Ocean Play LLC, 155 Wyandanch Lane, to construct a roof front door addition.
Second.
As submitted.
Second. Aye.
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 Thank you.
Do you have two stamps of that in there? So I'm not yelled at next time. Yeah, no, it's that new one.
I know, but there aren't shutters on here now, and they're going to have shutters.
Oh, wait, he says there aren't shutters.
There aren't shutters currently, right?
No, they pulled them off. They're doing some work, paint work, but they're going to be on there. They're going back.
They were previously approved. Okay, that's the confusion.
That's what I think.
Okay, thanks.
Next, lot number 2, Old Town LLC, 2 Old Town Lane, construct two-story single-family dwelling with attached garage with 2 accessory structures.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm John Keene, Keene Development. We're the owners and developers of Old Town on the corner of Wickapog and Old Town. I'm here tonight representing Lot 2, Old Town LLC. We're here for a new home, which we will pass out to everybody. Put everything in a book for you so you've got easier to look at the renderings and the floor plans and all the exhibits. Give an extra one, please.
We have an extra one when someone isn't here.
If you have an extra
I'd like
one.
it back.
I'm just going to look at it while I'm talking.
Good, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Good thinking.
The house is fully conforming to all of the setbacks, front yard, side yard, rear yard, size of the house, square footage, lot coverage, et cetera. We either meet or exceed everything. As you can see, it's a shingle-style home similar to other homes that we've put up in that community. We've added a section in the back showing you all the material. It's a wooden roof, it's shingle siding, cedar siding, true divided light windows, copper gutters. You can see we've got brick chimneys. And as I said, all the details are in the back for you to take a look at. If you've got any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I think the design is very handsome,
Thank
as
you.
many of the buildings are in that area.
Thank you.
I had a couple of questions. You referenced red copper on the plans. Is that just raw copper?
It's just regular copper, that's what you call it. yeah.
It won't be treated to stay?
It just turns brown, just like everything else, and eventually it'll get patinaed.
I had one area of concern on here, which is you've got symmetry on the two gables around the front door.
These are here.
Well, no, the two large ones there.
Yep,
And then to the, well, I guess that would be to the east.
East.
Yep.
yep.
You have that other gable. Where that roof line comes down to meet the other one, you have the diamond window in there.
Here.
That little diamond window.
Yep.
And you also carry across the brackets from over the front door. They don't appear elsewhere except there. And you have a column, an applied column, and it just feels, something doesn't, can you explain what's going on there a little bit? It's
Well, you've got, that's set back quite a ways, so I think the concept there was that's going to be a heavier cornice than for, say, let's say this area over here, further to the east or to the west. So I think just because it was deeper, they chose to make it a little bit heavier.
okay.
I think it'll probably disappear in the actual construction. This appears like a round column. It's actually not. It's actually just a pilaster on the corner, so it's going to be a smaller square column.
An applied. Okay.
Right.
And that setback is about the 4 feet or so, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
Is there a rendering of the back of this house?
It should be in the book, yeah.
Is there any soffit lighting up or down on this house? Okay. We don't get electrical plans, so I just wanted to. That's it. Those are my questions.
No comments from me.
Out of all of the homes that I think you presented to us in that neighborhood, this is probably the most traditional, funny to say, the most
I like this one
traditional you
better.
brought before us.
Yeah, and smaller, too.
And it's smaller.
Substantially
much smaller.
smaller, yeah.
I think it's less fussy, which
Yeah, that's what we tried to do.
It's-
Less fussy and a little
is
smaller.
my way of liking it.
A little less
Less,
pretentious.
yeah,
Exactly.
but the other ones are there, so
Right.
it has to.
Yep. It's good. Like I said, no objections.
Is there anyone, does anyone from the public have a comment on this application? No?
I'll make a motion, if I may, to accept and approve the application for Lot 2 at Old Town LLC, number 2 Old Town Lane, as presented.
Want this?
Second that.
Aye.
We're going to ditch it.
Aye.
No, I'm going to keep one.
Oh, he likes it.
Susan, your vote, sorry?
Yeah, aye.
Aye.
Stand up.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Is there one more stamped copy?
Here's a stamped copy. Oh, here.
Just give the extra back. We're not going to need it.
Moving on. Is there a letter in the, I'll give you a minute.
I think at the last meeting, you actually adjourned it.
We adjourned it? Okay, for farewell, so we don't have to do anything.
To February 11th, correct.
Okay, oh, I see. Next, Alexander Lynch, 391 Hill Street, amend a prior ARB approval. Oh, how are you? Better?
I'm doing what I can.
You're a good sport.
So I just want to reiterate, I didn't get to speak completely last time. I created a whole brief describing kind of how we got to where I was, and I just want to start off again by saying my family comes from Southampton back to the 1640s. I would never intend to disrespect the board, the community, or the village that I live in. I'm a local volunteer, and I'm hoping that if I get to describe and talk about my brief that I put together, you would see that it was kind of a series of events that led to where we were, not necessarily something that my client or I were trying to benefit from decisions and things like that.
We're not it's the building department that handles situations where plans are not
I completely
honored,
understand.
I guess. So telling us is...
And Jeff,
is-
you felt disrespected last meeting. I just want to tell you that I was instructed to come here by them. I wasn't trying, once again, to not do anything I wasn't supposed to do. I was told
But
to come.
it has been resolved, has it not?
Right. So Jason, just it wasn't, I didn't feel disrespected. I didn't, okay, nor do I attach any ill disrespect or ill regard for you. The building did not come down on its own accord. This was not an act of God. It was an act of a human being. So your reputation is very important, and that's what you started to say last time. So I will, it's not for me to accept, but someone deliberately or otherwise jeopardize your reputation. That's something that you should think about as you go forward. Now we're dealing, unfortunately, with a clean slate, a clear lot, but we all know it did not happen by accident. Somebody did it.
That's all I've been thinking about this entire time, to be honest with you. And part of my brief was to describe that there were things in my presentation that probably could have been more clear. And if you want me to go through it, I definitely put a lot of time into it. But
It doesn't matter.
I understand, and it's definitely a lesson learned on many accounts in terms of the process going through this board, the building department, and other things. It's definitely a lesson learned.
And the only lesson perhaps that you should walk away with, and not that I'm a sage, is know who you're dealing with. Because somebody jeopardized the thing that you can't replace, which is your reputation.
So let's just move ahead to the, so it has been resolved, and you are back here, and the building department has agreed that you can go forward, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, that's really what you need to tell us.
Yes, yeah, we've handled internally through the building department.
Okay, it's
violations
over.
and
Let's
fines.
just move ahead. Great.
Okay.
So show us.
You want me to go through?
Yeah,
Okay, great. No, I didn't know if-
This is an application, we got to go through it again, if we don't have the old one.
Well,
All right, so-
it's not even going
so
through
big
it
picture,
again.
and
There's
part of
no
what I say
house
is-
on there.
Yeah, this is a
This is
new-
new construction.
There are no changes in the previous approval.
there was a house that doesn't exist.
So we have to redo
This is a new construction.
Is it posted
I
in
can't,
mail?
so present it anew.
Does it have to be, Wayne?
So just a quick question, Wayne. So that's part, so if I read my last paragraph to you. If you had listened to my discussion, the part of the course was to we saved the rafters, we saved the front porch, we saved existing trim material to match the exterior soffits, fascia, trim details and such. On site, there are rafters that are saved from the roof structure. You see through my presentation that I put together that because of, I mean, it'd be worth it to see. I know you understand there's no building there, but the intent,
Well, what you're explaining
the intent is not to build
wrong.
something different
But
than
what I'm
what
saying,
we.
you're explaining exactly what you should do. You're telling us, I'm building a house, here's what it's going to look like, here are the materials that we're using, and in this case, you're explaining to us that those materials are in fact saved from the original house.
Let me go
So
through my
ahead.
thing like I planned, and I think if you need more additional information, then we'll take it from there.
So wait, I need to go. So is this newly posted and mailed, or we're at?
It was previously posted. This is a continuation of the previous.
From the last meeting? From the last meeting?
I don't think so. There was a hiatus because of the condition, which was that the house was gone. And I don't know how that all works, what the legal situation.
Has there been a new application, and was it posted in mail?
Claiming that it's the same, this is
So
legal.
here's the situation. So-
I'm not getting into it.
My drawings haven't changed. When this situation happened, and they said, well, you're going to need to put together a new set of drawings, and at that point, present to the village. It's the same set of drawings, and the whole description I was going to present tonight was to show you that I actually presented this. It's the same set, it's the same colors, it's the same materials, it's the same renderings that was previously issued to the, to some of you people that were on the board at that point.
So let me just, so is it considered a new application or an amend? It says,
So the building department referred you back
Amend.
to this board.
Correct.
They build a permit.
Because there were other situations in the village where people had made changes, and
Let's talk about your application. So essentially, this board previously approved a set of plans, and there was a structure that was represented and included certain materials that were remaining.
correct. And in my builder set, the construction set, it was to save existing rafters, roof structures, parts of the roof members, trim, et cetera. And that's still the intent. That's still the same set of drawings that I furnished at that point, the same drawings we have now.
what does that say on there? No addition to dwelling. Where are the other two pages of that application?
I have a copy of the,
Yeah, well, this is like,
So those materials were originally intended to be preserved primarily in place.
correct. And so what I was going to describe to you earlier was that throughout the process, through the moving companies, I have a letter from the moving company, you couldn't physically make access to lift it. We had to lift it twice, because part of it we have to make access to the neighbor's property to the east. And so what I figured at a certain point was, instead of moving it, we were going to take apart the second floor roof structure. And that's part of the thing I was going to say, which at that point, I probably should have went to the building department or come back to you guys and said, hey, or had somebody over to the site and said, I can't physically move this, the building companies won't do it. I'm going to take it apart instead of moving it. So that's one of the things I was going to describe earlier. And so we did that. We have those rafters on site, and the intent was to put those back. The center structure of the existing house, I'm going to do this, because I put a lot of effort into describing what the house is there. In fairness, the time I spent in this, I want to talk to you about the house, so maybe you have a clear understanding instead of piecemealing this together.
On the question of standing or notice, it's a bit of a unique case.
not only that, we've
Because-
got one page.
This is previously an application under Chapter 65 for a certificate of appropriateness.
Correct.
So it's,
And so the statute says the board may, at its option, hold a public hearing on the application, and the purpose of the public hearing is to get information to aid you in making that decision. So the question here, the applicant was, obviously, it's a change of circumstances from which this board, the representations that were made to this board when it made its first approval. So the question for the board will be is whether you desire to hold a public hearing, and it would have to be properly noticed or otherwise. So maybe you can hear what the applicant has to say tonight, if you believe that the information, or you could be benefited by holding that in a public hearing and get other input, then you could ask that to be scheduled and noticed.
And within the file are the proposed drawings. The information is there. The people were noticed. They gave notice the previous meeting I was here. And, I believe there was no,
Were they noticed for a alteration to the previous ARB approval, or were they noticed for new construction?
I think it's the first one you mentioned.
Okay, so for
This-
purposes of the application,
Hasn't been noticed since the original approval.
Well, this, it has,
Well, I was here, I posted the property the last time I was here.
When was
And we
that?
sent out the mailer. It was 2 meetings ago.
but that was for the purposes of...
December 10th.
That was for the purposes of an alteration to the existing structure, meaning a prior ARB approval.
And that hasn't
Now
been
we have,
decided?
that has, well, there's no
That's why I'm back
decision on
here
that
again.
because it's new construction now. The house has been torn
We-
down.
we had,
So for purposes of public posting, the public hasn't been properly notified that it's now new construction. That would be my only question.
and the building,
The public has been noticed that there was an alteration proposed.
Alteration only.
and it was approved, but,
For an amendment
so
to
here's
the
one
previous
page. I can't
application.
find any other page.
So I think I heard Wayne saying a couple of things. There's a practical aspect and there's a legal aspect.
Yeah.
And that this board has the authority to hear the application, to determine based on the information Jason presents, whether or not we need to have a subsequent public hearing. But I believe, and I would be comfortable, even though I know you think I'm the boogeyman in this case, to hear it out, because
That's definitely, I've never said anything over that. No.
all right. To hear it out, and if in fact the design is all that it is, I think the board, at least I as a board member, would be willing to vote on it, unless there's something that comes up where the other board members feel that there is a need for a subsequent public hearing. But in terms of notification, I think from a practical standpoint, again, maybe not from a legal standpoint, and that's what you have to opine on and what Curtis is raising as well, is I think the public has been made aware of the intent to make alterations to this property, then the issue of the demolition, and I'm not sure, I think everybody's had a fair chance to appear and make their statements.
Do you have a copy of, so I have a one page, someone's removed the second page.
I have a copy of the
Second
previous
copy.
approval, your approval, you mean the written determination?
No, I need, so my problem is that if we approve this, I have to sign a piece of paper 3 times, among others, a 4th piece of paper in the file. But there is no new, this is from before. This was signed, so this is the approval from before. Where's the new, you need a new application, something, don't I?
I believe you do.
So you couldn't produce it, you would have to go to the building department, but we might be able to work that out. Do you think we could?
I think that what Mr. Broadleib stated, you could proceed that way, and that after the discussion and opening up to the public, if there's any comments,
And then
you could then decide whether or not you need to move forward and hold a hearing or to adjourn it for any other purpose. So
But then can he go back and get a,
I think he needs to technically supply the building department with the proper forms.
yeah,
But we
I
don't,
do too.
right, but we don't have to have a subsequent public hearing. It's our decision whether or not, in fact, for that matter, anything we hear is subject to a public hearing. Not every application has to have a public hearing.
Most of them, what do you mean?
So
It's not a-
why don't we
it's not a
proceed and
requirement by
let
code.
Jason make his presentation and see where we get.
Got it. So one of the first meetings that I had, the criticism was the old faded, Curtis will remember this, I think, the forward-facing garage. And so throughout the process of the first meeting, what I decided to do was instead of doing an attached garage, we would utilize an existing garage that was located on the property. In order to use that garage, I actually had to move the house forward. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to refer to this photo, which is from the Southampton Village file, which identifies from their records the structure at hand that we're talking about when I reference what's called the main core. I've highlighted the shed dormer because through my meetings with Zach on site and the building inspector, this shed dormer, and in the future you'll see this front entry, date from the 1940s and potentially slightly later. So I'm going to just say the plus or minus 1940s. That, in my opinion, and people who visit the site, including Zach, said that this shed dormer and front entry were not necessarily contributing to the original structure. So, as noted in my October 2017 meeting, the existing floor framing would need to be moved, need to be taken off to make the move. And although the framing is old, it was noted by the village historian at our October 16th meeting that it was installed in a manner that was contrary to construction methodology of its time period. There was no reference to a high priority of preservation of this area during that meeting and subsequent board meetings. It was also noted in the following ARB meeting that the overall structure was much changed. The covered entry had no architectural value, and the main original structure was entirely changed with large dormers. These dormers on the front and rear. And this front porch, which we're saving, which is on site, was actually kind of joked about and said, not sure why you're saving it. And I said, because I liked it. And so we're trying to reuse that piece as well. The next review board meeting, the village historian and the board were concerned about the overall massing of additions in the main core. And by that, I mean is the front main structure ridge is aligned with the rear addition ridge. So you guys were really sensitive about the fact we wanted to lower the rear portion of the structure, which I get, and I supported that. So it was actually suggested to raise the main core, the center portion of the house, so that the ridge was not in line with the rear part of the structure. I agreed, but in order to achieve this, I actually had to lower the house, not raise it. So what I ended up doing was that allowed me to get 16 inches of ridge height difference from the front to the rear of the structure. But in order to do that, I had to cut the walls out. You can't really add 2 feet to a structure. You can't add it to a wall. It's just not structurally sound to do that to a building. You create these cripple walls which are not structurally sound. And on top of it, what you see later with all the different window changes and door changes and facade changes, you would never save that first floor structure. On top of that, the reason why I was doing that, because the existing house had a pyramid law non-conforming. So by lowering it also, even though the first floor got taller, by way of lowering it, I became more conforming with the pyramid law. Okay. So I'm hoping you see in the following image, you'll see how the structure has changed over time. So my first image shows that I referenced the front dormer dating to the 1940s or so, and Zach had agreed at a certain time that this front entry also was in and around from the same period of time. If I show you the next image, it's the front image again. So the window and dormer has changed again from the original village photo. There's a new box bay window here, which when you do a box bay window, it's framed all the way through. So all that framing is additional and new on the front facade, as well as the windows on both of these elevations. And you'll see when this wraps the corner, this addition on the northwest corner. Existing framing in all areas were highlighted, were modified and or modernized. So what you'll see later on, really keep an eye on this rafter space, which is 30 inches and 2 rafters on each side. So on the rear of the structure, you'll note the entire northern portion of the structure was altered from the original main core. All framing, windows, foundation, and related construction were around that 1940s time period. And just to say, the original foundation had some, older situations. This was a block foundation, so it was clearly done from a different time period. Once again, I also showed in plan this time, which, like I said, I would have definitely do this on every project in the future. The existing historic structure, as noted on the village survey, is this structure here. But subsequently, before my owner owned the property, someone gutted the entire inside. So there's really no walls of the original house on virtually half of the residence. So we have a front entry, windows on each side, and this complete rear portion of the structure, which is more modernized, I'm going to say. And so now take that into consideration of trying to move this structure. I've already cut the first floor framing out, basement framing. So now I'm left in my mind coming into further meetings that I'm really only saving the top. And I sincerely thought I could save the top. And that was my goal, to save the top of the structure. So just to follow through Second floor plan. So this central portion, again, modernized structural framing, rafter framing, which matched the same structure in the cottage that we tore down, which was okay to tore down in the garage, which so means to me that around the 1940s, 50s. We don't have a date, but it's definitely not dating back to the time that these rafters were done, for sure, and you'll see that in the photos. And by which there are eight total rafters, 30 inches of space left over of what I'm showing you so far that was left. So if you can see these images, okay, you can see from up there too. So image 7.1, this is the new dormer frame. You can see conventional 2x4 rafters, right? In image 7.2, at the end of the structure is the 30-inch section that we're talking about, 30 inches, 2 rafters on each side, which have been saved and are on site currently. Image 7.4. The modern framing, you see beyond the 2 rafter base spaces with, like I said, 30 inches of area that's left over from the existing structure only on the second floor. And then image 7.5, I'm showing again another view of the more modern framing, shed dormer framing, and then the 2 rafters on each side in that section. So it was also suggested in the 2017 October 10 meeting that we further emphasize what was the main core in the proposed work by matching the existing framing. So, by matching the existing oversized shingles. So the existing structure had these shingles that are 10 inches exposure. So it was suggested from my on-site meeting, Zach was really into these shingles, and I was as well. And to further emphasize this original sort of main core structure, we'd replicate those shingles. So on the main structure, we'd have the 10-inch shingles. Any additions would be 5-inch, half of the exposure of the main residence. And that happens now on site with the cottage and the garage that were previously approved and constructed. So I had submitted these following elevations to the board in my last meeting. It had seemed in previous meetings the board had difficulty seeing the original house. I mistook that for the board literally couldn't see in the drawings, not that you couldn't see it architecturally. For the final meeting, I submitted these drawings, and I highlighted the main core structure in blue. I highlighted the entire portion to graphically highlight the main residence, not to actually highlight what we're saving. If you compare, like if you think about what I just talked about, if I had conveyed that to you and you saw the actual construction documents, if you looked through the drawings carefully, you would see that this actually is different, right? The front entry's flipped. These windows are different, from the original proposed. This whole thing flipped. This is taller as I outlined, but shorter because I pushed it into the ground more. And so, I said, okay, on top of that, the entry has flipped from its previous location. So I left the final ARB meeting with the assumption I was saving the second floor framing and the remaining roof rafters. It became apparent over time that the modifications suggested and approved were not practical. In speaking with the previous contractor, we'd have to demo the existing surrounding single-story additions and first floor framing. And after this was completed, we'd have to lift the main core portion. Once up, they would need to demo the existing basement framing, foundation, and first floor walls. The second floor framing would remain and need to be moved again to make room for the excavation frame of the new residence. And then once completing the existing second floor roof structure, it would need to be lifted again and placed back on the new framing. And then the shed dormers would stay on for the move just to hold it together, but then would be demolished later to have the framing updated to try to get the required energy requirements in at least that portion of the main core. To add to the complexity, the moving companies were not able to move the residence because of the proximity to the adjacent property to the east. We were told by the previous contractor, the lifting company said that liability and permissions were too risky and costly to achieve, to get the permission from the neighboring properties to make the lifts that I was just describing. So I had assumed and thought that the best approach was to dismantle the existing roof framing and then rebuild it back in the proposed structure. Once again, probably should have got the building department involved and got you guys come over to see it hands-on and say, here's where we're at. So I'm clearly noting that as a lesson learned there. In addition to that, adding to that, the original contractor was fired. The new contractor that was hired was under the impression that the active building permit was for the entire project. Work accidentally commenced without permits in place for the main house project. I think, Rob, you noticed the demolition maybe, and you had called it in. And But when the building contractor filed for the paperwork, there was no clarification or discussion on either side what that permit on site was for. You see a permit on site, you feel like it's for that thing. So I feel that part of that was if that would have been picked up there, the demo permit would have been reviewed, and then potentially would have said, hey, we're expecting this part of the house to be saved, even though Jason's saying this. There would have been some dialogue there between some of the parties, and maybe this wouldn't have happened as well. So I just want you to say again, I want to say again, I hope you can see through my description that this was a result of several missteps in many areas, and I can understand the shock of seeing no structure there.
Where are the plans,
It's a big set.
the old set, November 20th?
Oh, you know what, they gave those back to me, and then I just printed up a new one and re-stamped them. That's I can get you those if you know at some point.
You know, because really, well, maybe these are, I thought this said November 20th. It does.
So is it stamped November 20th?
Yes, it's stamped November 20th. Are these the exact same, is this the exact same plan? Because we really need to move to however it happened, it's over.
Yes.
So what we're discussing here now is what's going to be and whether or
Correct.
not
So
we can approve it.
There is,
Yes? Is there? Where's the written decision for this?
I have that, a copy of that from the previous.
The file was in the building department.
This file is haunted. I mean, at certain points in the meeting, the drawings were lost when I was presenting the one. I mean, this is like,
Oh, no, this goes in there.
Question is whether or not we have a set of plans that are
Current.
lead stamped proposals.
they are, yes.
Yes, we have one. There should be, is this two? We need two. Oh, here's two. This one's January 11th. Is this exactly the same?
That was for the cottage and pool house. So
Okay.
that's been in construction.
Well, this has been, you're right.
Yeah.
Well, we need two sets of full plans.
So I'm under the impression the building department has one in their possession because they have it off to the side for the actual building permit, when and if you guys.
Well, they're supposed to, okay, well.
I promise you, we give the proper drawings, we give multiple sets, we give you guys renderings. I have copies of these drawings. This happened in one of my October meetings, so you came and the drawings weren't there. Again, it was like 6 copies.
Well, we're going to need another set of, so now it says approved by building inspector January 9th on these November plans.
Okay.
So that's a little bit of a help. It's written by
Yeah,
hand.
so I think they have another copy.
Well, I hope they do. Otherwise, we need another copy because we need to have two copies in the file.
Definitely, I'll talk to the building department tomorrow.
And I am also missing, so have we resolved on a new building permit?
Well, the question for the board after the presentation is, do you have enough information? Obviously, you need another set of plans, and whether or not the board has looked at those plans, and there's any other questions or comments or information you need to review the revised application.
Right,
So I'm satisfied with Jason's presentation and his plans as submitted. If this plan equals that plan, I'm good.
Can I just summarize what I heard, and you can correct me? Basically, even with the original approval, there was, and I'm a staunch supporter of the historic district, and I was one of the people who was sorry that this house got torn down. By the way, the only reason I mentioned it to Chris Talbot was because he had said to me maybe 4 days before, we're going to bring you guys back over to this house to take a look at it. Some things have changed. All I said to him was I turned back east from Hampton Bays, drove past the house one day and it was gone. And I happened to go and read files, so I'd let him know. I said, I don't know what we were going to go see, but it's not there anymore. But it sounds like what was previously approved was the preservation of precious little. Basically, 4 rafters, 2 on each side, and maybe a little bit of posting somewhere in the corners.
Yes.
But almost everything else had been. This brings up a separate question, which we've addressed on a couple occasions recently, which is this sort of creeping deterioration of some of the historic assets in the village. One of the reasons why I think we need to be vigilant about some of the incremental changes that get proposed, because, bit by bit by bit, we can lose the historic essence. It sounds to me almost as though the historic essence of this house was essentially lost. Other than the look and feel from the outside, the way that center structure looked from the outside.
Well, it was significantly compromised, but unfortunately, since you don't have jurisdiction over interiors.
Right.
When we're dealing with the timber frame structure of the late 18th century, is about the interior, insofar as you're looking to verify how much is left. You requested it, you granted permission, site visit, take a look, et cetera. So that's standing in the cellar hole, looking into a crawl space about this high with a flashlight to see these sorts of things, details of joists and whatnot. That's very little to look at, but oftentimes enough to verify whether the structure seems to be of a certain period or not, but it's certainly not a comprehensive look. The thing is that when you have a building like this which retains the massing that's correct, you can make certain assumptions. The corner posts are there. It would be hard to pull a corner post and replace it, et cetera. So I would guess that there was more there than met the eye, but there's no way of verifying that. And just visually from the outside, it had certainly gone through many stages of reconstruction and remodeling that compromised the integrity.
Did the original proposal, was it to include all new windows and
Yes.
new chimney?
Yes, sir.
I'm with Jeff on this. I mean, there are some lessons to take away for the historic district, in my opinion, but with respect to these plans, if you're creating what was going to be essentially all new surfaces on the outside, all new windows, but the look and feel of the history, absent maybe some corner posts and a few rafters that are, some of which have been saved and will be reincorporated, I don't have any issue with this.
I even offered, just to show you the kind of person I am, I even offered to the building department to volunteer my time to be a liaison between you guys and that point at which someone starts demoing and help communicate what you guys are approving to the actual builders, contractors on site, so these kind of things don't happen.
They've been happening. That's part of, your
that's why-
timing was bad. Let me just point that out. It's not your fault, the timing, but you did have unlucky timing. I'm not against the new plan of the old house. However, there are some secretarial duties that need to be accomplished in order for you to get a building permit. So you would have to go. So I only have one page of the old building permit that claims that you're just adding on.
I think part of
And
that's been
so,
processed, so I can get copies of that for you. I think
so
it's,
how come it's not in the file?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, we did it, and then the drawings, and that's why I think you have a copy of a building
The
permit.
building permit in there is the prior building permit, and all they did was they crossed out and they made changes.
Oh, that's weird.
So
So-
that's what was done.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I'm doing calculations, you're actually 700 square feet smaller than what was originally proposed. That's what it shows on the building permit.
Yeah, no, it didn't.
All right, so I think
Oh, that's the cottage. That's minus the cottage.
Yeah.
The new structure doesn't include the cottage.
Okay, so
That's the number.
okay, so,
Because the cottage is a pre-existing, counts as the GFA of the
Makes
main
sense.
residence.
I am loath to pull this one piece of paper out, which is there should be more copies. There should be 3 copies under this, 2 copies under this. They're gone. It says that you're, adding on, but, so we need to have a clear building permit, I believe, that is not an amendment, but that is actually a new structure. And the question is, does it need to?
So wouldn't this be a situation where it'd be closed for written comment, the comment being the satisfactory completing the file as required, and it doesn't need any further public hearing? It's closed for further.
We can close it with the stipulation that there's a new building permit. Is that okay?
That's fine.
And a building application you need to fill out, because this one, first of all, and there needs to be another certificate of appropriateness, because I signed it in November when we approved the previous plan. So we can't just, I don't know what they were doing, but, in terms of form, we legally have to have this.
And do we, we're good on notice to
And
neighbors?
is the notice
Standing?
okay? That's
Well,
it.
like I said, the statute
provides for us to say
provides
it's
for
okay?
it to be your option whether to hold the public hearing, and the degree of public interest obviously is one of your contributing factors as to whether or not you should. You've had the original hearing, you've had a hearing on the alterations. You could determine whether or not to hold the hearing or not hold the hearing. But the question here, I just want to ask, is your presentation tonight, is that in the record?
Yes, all the copies of
Those
each
drawings
of
and
these
everything else?
photos, the drawings, and I'm more than welcome to give my brief, a copy of my brief as well.
We stamp that in.
Yeah.
That should be submitted for the
They have it.
board.
You guys should have it as well.
It's, I'm afraid to touch any of it, it's fragile.
I think that's very helpful, but what I'm hearing is there may or may not be in the building department an actual separate application form that describes exactly the work that you
That's
just
correct.
proposed.
We did that, right? A whole new, yeah, we did a whole.
You did? Okay,
And
well, we don't
along
have
with
that. And that's what I need. Because otherwise, because it's already been approved, I can't undo a document. We need to have a new document that actually tells that this is a new house, but the plans that are in the file could be the same, right?
Yeah,
But we
did
need
all,
it,
yeah.
so we only have
So
one
we'll go to the building
copy.
department, and then we'll make them appear into your file.
I seem to have only one copy of the building plans and one copy of the outbuildings plans, so I would need an additional set that's stamped into the building department.
Okay.
Okay,
Well, first thing in the morning, yeah.
Okay, good.
See where they
So we,
I should also just mention, I received actually a communication from the eastern neighbor. I don't know if the building department put them in touch with me, but said that either you or someone from the team had reached out to them, had provided a set of the plans, based on the
That's where
fact
they
that the
went.
house was gone, was going to be completely rebuilt, and they had no problems with it. That was the communication.
all right, so could we approve?
Is there other
I
public
think
comment?
first you should ask if
Oh,
there
is
is
there any
anybody from
public
the
comment? I thought I just did that. No? The usual response. Okay.
May I make a motion that we close the public hearing for 391 Hill Street for written comments from the public or others and additional information from
We need another
Jason?
written decision, Wayne?
I would,
Well,
Yeah.
it's in the historic district, so it
Yes.
requires a written
So why don't we
decision.
just close it for written decision? All he has to do is put the
Okay.
Should we
forms
do that
in. What's the
instead?
point of
Okay.
making
So-
some other,
Let me amend my motion. I'll move that we close this application and submit it to council for written decision
with the stipulation,
with the,
proper forms be filed?
making sure that the administrative details are covered with the building department.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Yeah,
Aye.
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 Right.
Misery is almost over.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, so this is approved
Jason.
with conditions.
Sleep again.
Thanks, Jason.
Now, I have, did something get moved on the agenda so that, is Anthony Punnett the last on yours, or on?
No, that's
Yeah,
adjourned.
and they're all
That's
adjourned.
adjourned?
All adjourned,
Okay,
yeah.
so now we're,
Joyce is
Not a-
adjourned as well.
right. Punnett needs to be adjourned.
It's adjourned till February 11th, is the letter requesting.
In the file for Punnett? I gave Wayne my good,
Friday.
do I have a motion to approve the applicant's request for adjournment on Anthony Punnett, 310 Hill Street, amend a prior ARB decision?
So moved.
Second.
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
adjourned.
Antoinette, can you hand me one of those waters, please?
God, when did we get waters like that?
Those aren't mine.
Oh, that's pretty impressive. Next,
I'm going to assume they're good.
They're sealed.
'24 Gin Lane. We gotta keep this over here, that's just too much.
Can you guys just hold up
We
one
need a
second,
minute.
just so I can get my notes in order?
Madam Chair.
What are we doing?
Susan, so you're going to, when you're ready, make a statement
Yes.
that a
Before
continuation
you
of the hearing.
start, let them put this stuff down.
There's more over there, right?
Just do this.
It goes on the east side of the model.
It's not big enough. I'm going to build the whole building.
Where are the model trains?
I know.
Just tell me when to proceed.
Well, I'd like to say something first. Before we proceed, as for your request for my recusal, Mr. Bennett, I'm going to read a statement. With respect to the hearing for 24 Gin Lane, I will not recuse myself from the ARB proceedings regarding this application. There is no basis for recusal under ARB rules and regulations or under any applicable law that could require recusal. I have no property interest, pecuniary interest, or any other interest that could even arguably require my recusal. Now you can go ahead.
Thank you.
John, before you start, I just want to make sure that this is the hearing, as the board has decided, different from the previous proceedings, is that there's two applications, two properties, and the board has decided to hold them separately, as where in the past you held the hearings jointly. So this hearing right now is on the continuation of 24 Gin Lane only.
That's correct.
So could I just, so when we were last here, I believe there were comments. We were in the comment phase, and that was ended by Mr. No, Mr. Handler was speaking, but Bo Robinson said it was late and wanted to close the meeting. So I believe that perhaps we should start there and then go backwards.
Well, I just wanted to, just a 1 minute of housekeeping.
Okay.
Mr. Coburn
Okay,
did
fine.
notice that there was an issue with
Something,
one of
a window.
one of the elevations that was what is now shown on A201, which is on the southwest elevation. It was a blurriness, it had been cut off with the computer, and that is a full set for some time. But I just wanted to, that's the wee bit of housekeeping.
So the amended plans are in the file?
It's not really amended, it was somewhat
Clarified,
obscure.
whatever you want to
Clarified.
call it.
They've been in the file for some time. They've been in the file for at
Okay.
least 11,
So-
13 days, yeah.
So,
But I would agree with you, we presented the matter in full. and I
okay,
think we're at the
great.
comment period.
Honestly, I'm trying to move it along. I know it might not appear that way, but I am.
We're on the same page.
Okay, great. So then, Mr. Bragman, if whoever was, the two of you want to, whatever. Great. And I would appreciate if repetitions were kept to a minimum. I know that's hard to do.
Chair Stevenson and board members, my name is Jeff Bragman. I'm co-counsel with Richard Handler for the Manger and Michael Check neighbors, and I was going to ask if I could address you earlier, and I'm glad I have an opportunity rather quickly to address you, because I wanted to talk about some procedural issues that have come up. One of them you've taken care of, which is the issue of recusing yourself that was brought up in the applicant's motion to re-argue. I don't think, since the court's going to decide it, I don't need to recite the law except to say that we agree with the statement that it's a financial or proprietary interest of some kind that is what triggers, that's the policy that triggers a recusal, and there's nothing like that that evolves out of participating in a civic group like the Southampton Association. But there are some other issues that do bear some consideration before we get into the substance of the hearing. And one of them is that counsel was, at the last time, pretty assertive that he's going to introduce evidence from the prior hearings, and we were having a debate as to what that evidence would be and whether it could include testimony and the record, the transcript of testimony. And in connection with that, I received a memo from Bo Robinson on January 18th, in which he paraphrased a call that he made to the judges law secretary. And what he stated was that Judge Pasterosa's law clerk has advised this office that the court considers the phrase "new hearing" in its decision to mean a new hearing from a new start with new testimony and submissions. And then it contained a second sentence in the memo that troubled me a little bit. He said, "This does not preclude the submission during the new hearing of any documents, records, or testimony originating from or submitted during the pre-litigation proceedings." I was concerned enough about that I wrote to the court on January 22nd, 2019, specifically focusing on the second sentence in that memo, the sentence that said it wouldn't preclude the submission of records or testimony, because to me it sounded like that was an opinion from Mr. Robinson, not that it might not have been a statement of the court's policy. I did receive a telephone call, which is a recorded telephone call, of which I have a verbatim transcript, in which the court's law secretary stated explicitly that the last sentence in that memorandum was not entirely accurate. And what he said was explicitly in this telephone call to me, that the parties could reuse evidence, but that evidence would be documentary evidence, reports, exhibits, maps, and other documents of that nature, and that testimony or transcripts would not be included. So to put the, to give Mr. Robinson the greatest benefit of the doubt, I wanted to advise you that he apparently was mistaken and misstated the substance of the call. And I think it's clear from the telephone call that I got, and I have a transcript of it, as I said, that it would be error to submit testimony or transcripts of testimony. Now, the simplest way to handle that, if Mr. Bennett does intend to introduce evidence from the prior hearings, would be for us to sit down together and he could show us the documentary evidence that he wants to put in, and it's likely that we could reach an agreement on most, if not all, of the documents. If we couldn't reach an agreement, then your board could decide whether or not the evidence came in or not. I'm a little troubled because I got a letter tonight at around 5 o'clock indicating that Mr. Bennett had submitted some evidence from the prior record. I have no idea what it is, but I got the confirming letter without any statement.
I don't believe that it is transcripts or testimony. It's just this, maps, comparison studies.
From the prior hearing?
Well, I'm not looking at the prior hearing because I heard what the judge said. I'm just looking at what's in the file now, but I believe that that was represented to me by the secretary in the building department.
Well, there were two letters that came in. One came in on Friday, and that did contain evidence that's actually new for this hearing, which were comparisons and size.
Oh.
Those memos came in to you on Friday. They were hand-delivered, apparently, to your office, to this office, to Village Hall. They were FedExed to us, so we only got them today.
Well, contrary to popular belief, we don't spend every single waking minute. In the building department, I was in there, I came in today, and if something comes in that's stamped, forgive me, my voice is going, the 25th of January, I feel that I didn't have time to read it. I have to prepare for the meeting, so we're not closing the meeting. This is new information. Do you have, the transcript of this, because this has gotten to be such a tussle, really. Do you have the transcript of the phone call with the...
Yes.
Madam Chairwoman, I want to just interject at this point. I would suggest that you take counsel under advisement whether Bo Robinson or Mr. Bragman are having conversations with the court. The court's decision is clear that this is a new hearing, and we're to hear whatever testimony or records that will support the application or support anybody who's opposed to it position. Now, clearly, there's been some discussion of prior transcripts. That's not to say that the party may not come in and make the same statement over again.
Agreed.
So nonetheless, I think it would be more productive if Mr. Bragman can address the board with the standards that we have to apply as to the application before us, and The question is going to be for this board to weigh the information that's now before us. We're not here to debate what material or otherwise. We certainly have taken under advisement what the courts have said or otherwise, and what you're saying tonight, Mr. Bragman, but I think it would be more productive if we address the standards and the criteria which this board has to apply, and whether or not the application does meet those standards or not.
Well, I'm going to, I understand your comment, and we certainly want to get to that point, but we want to make sure that in the procedures that the board follows, that we're not prejudiced in addressing the standards of the statute. So I have a little bit more discussion to talk about before I get to the standards, because there are a couple of issues that council has raised. And I am going to hand in the transcript for the record so that you can read it. The other thing that we wanted to suggest to you is that in order to, I know Mr. Schleifer's here tonight, and I know he's interested in expediting this hearing and getting it to move forward as efficiently as possible. And I know that the board is aware of the fact that we have, both sides have neighbors, we have experts, we have community members, we have community groups who are going to be involved in participating in the hearings on this. And there are also experts on both sides, including landscape designers, architectural historians, engineers on both sides. And we wrote the board last week to suggest some procedures that we thought might help speed the case along and make the process a little bit more orderly and deliberative. We want to be fair to the applicants, we want to be fair to the board and fair to the other people in the room tonight who have applications. And I wanted to suggest to you the possibility that we schedule this hearing, which is obviously going to continue for some time, in increments of an hour and a half, and allow the applicant to proceed. I understand that the case has been divided into two parts, the smaller house and the larger house, which I think is appropriate, but it would be, I think, more efficient for you and for us if we could hear the applicant out and hear his entire case without interruption, without having to bring in our experts, at every hearing while they're presenting evidence, so that we get the full picture of what their case is on both aspects of it. And we're perfectly willing to let them do that essentially without opposition and without commentary issue by issue until they go from start to finish. And then we could do the same. And the reason that I suggested an hour and a half is not to hamstring them, but it's so that you could predict your schedule a little bit more clearly, so that you could get through the other cases, so that we wouldn't wind up at 10:30 at night having to take, testimony. It also is better for our convenience, because we do have experts, we have a team that's evaluating this evidence, and it's very difficult for us to bring in experts hearing after hearing after hearing when really all they're doing is listening to the other side present. What I'm suggesting is a procedure that's a little bit more like a trial just in the way it's ordered. I think it's something that would speed the case along, and I'm recommending it in the interests of just keeping it moving and trying not to disrupt your schedule. I'm a little concerned because we had, apparently the applicant submitted, I guess, the bulk of his argument, which is these two separate memos on each property, to you on Friday. I didn't get them until today. I think both Mr. Handler and I got them today. And, I have to say to you that, we have a team that's evaluating this stuff. And we cannot come in, if it's submitted on a Friday, the next business day after a weekend, it is not possible for us to assemble our team and address these issues so that we can come in and speak to you about the issues.
Well, I would say yes, that's true of the board too, and since this is a public meeting, it's also necessary to have the file available to the public, and not just for one day before, they can present, anyone can say what they want to say, but we would leave the meeting open. That's all.
Okay, I'm saying this by way of telling you that we're not ready to proceed to answer these things. When we get memos.
We understand that.
Okay. And also, one of our experts, Michael Goldblum, happens to have fallen ill this weekend and can't,
Well, I just told you, we're not,
Okay. So that's really all that I'm prepared to say tonight.
so let's move on to
Okay. Mr. Handler's here. I don't know, do you want to, he doesn't want to answer. Okay, so we're prepared to listen tonight to this
Great.
material.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we're just on 24 Gin Lane.
Yes,
So
let's just, it's going, that's fine
just want to
for now.
understand that you're
Are you
here to
gonna-
listen, but I think Mr. Bennett stated whatever he's resting on his submissions.
If Mr. Bennett is done with 24, then we'd like to answer another day. If he wants to proceed on 28 and start, we'll listen
We
to him.
haven't had time to look at, every one of us has not had time to read the voluminous stuff.
May I respond?
Sure.
If I may. It's a page, and it's a 2.5-page letter. All it does was summarize what we put in
This
8
is for
weeks ago.
24.
Up to 24. It summarizes what we put in 8 weeks ago. It doesn't introduce any new evidence. All it does is summarize what we put in. That's it. I remember Mr. Coburn saying at the last meeting, are you, that position, going to be ready to respond to 24? As a matter of fact, can you give me some sort of indication of what your points will be? So here we are again. The case was heard on December 10th. There's been no change whatsoever in the design of 24. Today was 28. And all you have is procedural arguments. I have not heard, since this case was filed over 3 months ago, one substantive comment. And we have our experts here. We bring them here every night. We bring them here every time. I've heard not one substantive comment. On 24, it was a 2.5-page letter that does nothing other than summarize what Tim Haynes and our team put in at length over 7 weeks ago. Again, not surprisingly, all we have is a request for an adjournment. That's not right.
So I appreciate the applicant's request.
Have any substantive comments whatsoever?
And
Please don't scold the board.
My comments are what's coming out of my mouth. So the comment is this. While there may be a 2-page summary, John, and it may be information that was in the past file, but to Wayne's point, this is all new. I'm treating it as new. This was put in November.
24.
This is all part of what was put in November.
No, so I'm looking at a submission log submitted January 25th, and the submission submitted John, please let me speak. Just let me speak. Okay? And thank you. When it's your turn to speak, Mr. Schleifer, you can speak as well. Okay. I'm looking at probably 100-page of material. Whether it's new, whether it's old, it's submitted within the last couple of days. I would like, I think I deserve, the opportunity to review it. And this has been a long process for the sake of another 2 weeks. Whether you consider it indulgent, Mr. Schleifer, or not, I'm not in a position right now to make a vote on this until I've had a chance to review it sufficiently. I don't know. Right now, it's before the board to make other comments.
I've already said I'm not prepared. I was holding it open, so unless there's someone, this is not 3 pages. And, you know, if you wanted us to read it 2 weeks ago, you should have put it in the file.
It's no new evidence.
That is not where we are.
It's a 3-page cover letter, I think is what he said, with other materials that were
That's
previously...
correct. And we are under a court order to review the documents anew.
The documents that were attached to it were previously submitted. He's just underscoring them as illustrations to the letter.
Right. And all those things being said,
we didn't have time.
I need, and I'm not chastising Mr. Bennett or Mr. Schleifer for doing it in this way and in this timing. Whatever motivation or timing it took them to do it, it is what it is. But what I'm saying is, for me to give it consideration and this circumspect review that it deserves, then I need more time than simply here taking a few minutes out or coming here this afternoon and getting this. So I am not in a position to vote tonight. And
I just have a couple of questions. Because I think we're taking this new case or new application way too far. The design and elevations have been submitted to the file from day one of the resubmission, correct? Have there been any changes, any alterations, any modifications in the design of the house? We're talking 24, we're not talking about the other application right now. Have there been any changes, any alterations, any substantive difference between what was originally submitted in November to present?
No.
So what we're discussing is the documents which are, just let me finish.
Mr. Bennett, could we make sure that the board members speak, and then you can have your opportunity?
Because I want to make sure I understand what it is that we're saying we have not had a chance to review. What we are saying, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, is we have not had time to review the documents, which are highlights of what previous discussions, details, and information from possibly the prior meeting being submitted today. That's what we're, not anything about the design.
Right.
So can we have a substantive conversation about the design to build a case on this application, because we have not said or made any discussion, we have not had any detail, we have not had any negative, positive, or anything, any difference in terms of the design of this house from day one, prior application to present. So at least can we talk about the design? We can talk about all of the clerical stuff and documentation. Can we at least have a conversation about the design?
Right. So it's design, it's design in the context of our authority as the board, which lists a number of criteria, design, scale, and so on. There are statements made in here, which I did read it in a cursory fashion, and there are statements being made in here that reference tables and points that relate to how the applicant is interpreting those criteria that we must supply. I would like to look at this and all the attachments to it and the exhibits in detail with that. If you're asking me, am I going to make a comment tonight about fenestration or anything like that, I'm less concerned about that than I am about the statements.
So at least we can get that out of the way. At least what you're saying is that you don't have any issue with it?
No, we're not saying anything.
I said I'm less concerned about that, but I'm not saying that there's no concern, but that all the criteria that are outlined in Section 65, in which Mr. Bennett had made some contemporaneous claims, I want to have the opportunity to review that in connection with the exhibits that are here, whether they're new, old, submitted, or not. And I'm simply not in a position tonight to comment on that which we are authorized to do in order for me to make a vote.
What about on the plans? What about your own comments on the plans themselves? Separate from John's...
Right. It's hard to parse out, at least it is for me, a discussion about whether it be fenestration or materials when there's a gestalt of statements made in here in terms of compatibility. I want to look at it in its entirety, and I'm just not in a position to vote tonight. So you guys can talk as much as you want, but I'm not going to make a vote tonight on this until I've had a chance. You may think I'm unreasonable.
No. I'm not prepared to vote either. I just want to let's great. Let's at least get to a point where we can agree on something. Right now we're disagreeing on everything. Or can we agree on something?
Okay.
Something being, we have not had any conversation about the design of the house compatibility aside, I like to hear from the applicant, the design, the fenestration, what was the intent in creating the design? What is the compatibility? How they're defining the compatibility to the community, the area? I would like that because that's never been a part of this conversation.
That was discussed last time.
But wait a second, no, Curtis is making a good point. If the applicant wants to go take us through that, now, that I would be willing to hear. But what I'm not willing to do is to say, except, here, take this is what I submitted,
But let's build the
3 months
application.
ago.
But we already talked, they already presented the design. They showed us this thing. They talked about
Comments on the design?
arts and crafts. It was simplified in the American, oh, I do, watch out.
Was that the prior
Simplified in
application, or
a
was
more
this one?
American way. That was just the last time. Now, it was, there were, it was late. So I have to agree with Mr. Broadleaf. I need to look at this. If you want to put this in, I need to look at it. So let's just, would you like,
So I think, if I may interject, it sounds like the board, you can either do as Mr. Broadleaf suggested, if you want the applicant or his agents to make any further presentations on
That's
those
true.
designs, you could ask them to do that. If you don't desire that, then you can proceed, and the decision for you, the action you would take is either adjourn the hearing for all purposes, or you could close it subject to written comments. I think, based on what I've heard, you might want to adjourn it for all purposes. The question would be the date you want to schedule that to,
the next meeting?
February 11th.
Would that be,
All parties would
Are you
submit whatever they
asking us
want to
to
by the next
no,
meeting.
we're adjourning for all purposes.
we can-
You're not asking us.
Ask, is there
Would you
any-
like to speak? Mr. Schleifer, please, step forward and
Just use your name.
please just
Hi,
say,
I'm Scott Schleifer.
good.
Thank you all for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
You are a principal of the
He owns it.
I am.
company, the LLC?
Yep. The property on 24 Gin and the design, I believe that it was originally submitted and it has not been changed in over a year and a half. It's a 5,066 square foot home on a property that is zoned for something huge. 13 foot. One of the world's most renowned, in my opinion, architects and designers built something historic and great and simple at my behest. And I really appreciate y'all taking the time to review it and making a decision for whether or not you think it's right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So we can't take public comment on?
Yeah.
Well, if there's anybody else
Sure,
from the
anybody,
public.
is there anyone else who wants to speak about this tonight?
On 24 June
On
Lane?
24. Then we could skip ahead.
What I'd like, if I may, to have, if the board has any comments.
I was wondering, have the opposing parties here had a chance to review the plans for 24 Gin Lane? When were they delivered?
No,
November.
Mr. Bragman said he received this package today.
I'm asking about the plans and the architecture, Jeff. I'm wondering how long people have had to review the plans and the architecture for this. When were they received?
We just saw it today. Oh, the plans. Uh-oh, now we're going to have another. What's the difference? We're not doing it. Move ahead.
Members of the board, Richard Handler, 50 Broadway, Amityville, on behalf of two of the objectants, the Michael Checks and the Mangers. Those plans were delivered sometime in December. As I recall, Mr. Bennett said that they would be delivered the following Monday or week, and it was delivered about 2.5 weeks later, but they were delivered sometime about right before Christmas. I'm not quite sure, John, you can correct me. Our main architect, who has examined those plans and has developed significant criticism regarding both of the structures. Mr. Michael Goldblum is ill. I received an email from him this morning. He was planning to be here, but issues with a cold evolving into a flu, etc., make it impossible for him to get here from the city. So just on that point alone, we'd respectfully request that we have an opportunity to adjourn this to the next date that the board feels appropriate so that Mr. Goldblum, our principal expert, could be here to discuss the details. Secondly, with respect to the materials that were filed with the board on Friday, I received those today by messenger at about 12:30 in the afternoon. They could have easily been delivered by messenger to Mr. Bragman or myself on Friday the same way they were filed with the board, but they weren't. Had they been delivered to us or at least scanned and emailed to us on Friday, that would have given us an opportunity to look them over and to develop some critical comment and perhaps prepare a written submission. I will say that as to the exhibits in connection with the submission for 24 Gin Lane, they contain two aerials, both dated December 10th, which were not part of the prior record, and they contain a copy of the decision of this board with an application regarding 24 Gin Lane going back to November of 2014. These are new materials and items that were not part of the prior record, and as a result, they're new to us now. And so this is not just a resubmission of the same details that were provided last time. These are new items. Significantly, these comparisons, which are contained in today's letter and memorandum, contain new statistics, new details, new GFA comparisons, new square footage and statistics that are new and were drawn specifically with respect to this letter that were not included before. And again, we haven't had an opportunity to authenticate them, to compare them, or to comment upon them. And we would respectfully request that the board put this over the consideration of 24 Gin Lane for all purposes to the next hearing so that Mr. Goldblum can comment and that we can submit a response to this. Thank you.
Mr. Schleifer, if you want to speak, please. Yes.
This seems to me like just a desire to delay.
Well, except that we haven't had a chance to read it either. I mean, that's the part you keep forgetting.
These were all in the record. December 10th, those aerials. I presented them as part of the last hearing.
You are commenting, you're making specific exhibits from this like homework. I understand no, it says, it refers to your 3 pages, well, this is dated January 25th.
If I may interject.
Yes, let's just stop.
Information is in the record. The board will decide whether they're going to keep the hearing open or otherwise to consider.
We've already gone over this. I'd love to move on if we could. We're not going to vote
Any
tonight.
further comments? That's essentially
Yes, any further comments? And then we could, do I have a motion to adjourn for all purposes the application of 24 Gin Lane LLC until our next meeting on February 11th?
I
So
second
moved? Oh, no, I didn't make
Did you
the
move? Okay.
No, I need a motion from
I
you.
move that we adjourn the application of SH24 LLC, 24 Gin Lane, Southampton, New York, for all purposes to the next meeting on February 11th.
Do I have a second? I second.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
As long as we're prepared to dig into the substantive architectural issues at the next meeting, I would be inclined to vote yes.
I think it can be fairly
Because the plans have been on file for a long time now, and we haven't had a single substantive discussion about the architecture. I don't understand. If this were any other application, I think we would have had by now an hour or more of substantive discussion on this application. Will we have that?
Yes, by dint of the fact that the objectants have said that they're going to be coming back with their comments, so we're going to hear their side. I'm sure the applicant will have their comments, so there, by definition, will be a thorough discussion at that point. We will have had a chance to review it. So for the sake of 2 weeks, I think we'll all be in a better position, and we're obviously not in a position on a board now to agree on it one way or the other. So let's move on, and then we can hear the initial application.
I'm sorry for
It still comes out that it's okay.
I'm sorry for the architect's illness. Given that he otherwise would have been prepared to present tonight, can we get a report or a written summary of his concerns prior to our meeting so that we can consider those prior to our next meeting?
And perhaps you could share.
Have you tried?
We'll try to do that.
Sorry. Does that seem, wouldn't that be helpful?
Yes, Richard Handler again, thank you. I hope that Mr. Goldblum's condition would permit that. I really can't speak to his evolving health condition. We're aware of the board's interest in getting that information as soon as possible, and the first thing tomorrow morning, I will reach out to Mr. Goldblum and ask him to make every effort to provide his report to the board as quickly as possible with respect to that.
I do remember that he moved quite fast in some other presentation, that he doesn't spend hours opining about the architecture, so
Thank you.
he seems pretty good at the testimony.
I vote aye on the motion.
Okay, carries. It would have been okay anyway.
Well, we did hear from Curtis.
Curtis is not voting, right?
No, I'm not.
But you have to say, you're not voting at all?
Yes, no?
Yes or no?
I abstain from that vote. I just think until we as a board start creating a record and stop kicking the can down the road, it's just going to be nonsense over and over and over again.
Okay, fine.
So
We're moving.
But I'm not sure, because Bo has advised me on this previously, if we're here, then one has to make a vote one way or the other.
We did.
But
He's voting no.
right.
No.
Okay, fine.
No, you can't be present and abstain.
Abstain.
Okay, then no.
Okay, fine. Okay, moving on. SH 28 LLC, 28 Gin Lane.
Again, this is a continuation of the hearing. That's from December 20th, I believe.
We never got there. This is the beginning of the new hearing of
Right.
But you submitted your
SH
affidavit
28
posting.
LLC.
At the last meeting, you submitted an affidavit posting. So we have jurisdiction. It's a
Yes, we do. It's
continuation of
just
the
that we
hearing.
didn't get through 24. So now we're moving ahead to the presentation by Mr. Bennett and his team for 28 Gin Lane.
So why don't we just get directly to the architecture?
That'd
Before
be
you do
great.
that, Madam Chairwoman, did you want to?
Oh, wait, I have to,
Statement?
I'm sorry, I have to read my statement again.
Carried over from last time, or want to just
Oh,
deem it
no.
accepted? It's up to you.
You can accept my statement with respect to my,
Yes, yeah, I think that's,
As it applies to this application.
applies to this application.
okay, thank you very much, Mr. Bennett, I appreciate it. You know, it's weird, but we have to stand up to kind of see this, but that's okay. I'll stand up, maybe I'm...
Can you zoom in? Thanks.
So, 28 Gin Lane.
State your name for the record.
I'm Tim Haynes, the architect for the project in question. So the approach which meanders through brings you to a carriage house. And our inspiration for that carriage house being the Salutation by Lutchins, and the Barnes Carriage House down the road. And it is, the entire house is based on the shingle style and Tudor revival, both styles found commonly in the area and in the village. We started with the desire on the project in the redesign to come at it from this sort of shingle style and Tudor revival and arts and crafts vantage point so that we could break with the previous design, and using those instruments we could accentuate asymmetrical massing, natural materials, varying roof profiles, and contrasting volumes. And we wanted the project to break down in terms of all of those volumes and massing, in terms of looking as if it had been almost added onto over time. We also wanted it to reveal itself slowly, so hence we have driving through the carriage house and into an inner court where there are various bay windows, porches, overhangs, hip roofs, and gable ends to give a sort of interplay of those masses and volumes in a picturesque way, which is really coming out of an English tradition of the English country house, which got translated then in America in the shingle style, where the more masonry structures had become covered with shingles, in this case red cedar perfections. And we employed white trim and copper detailing and brick chimneys. We also, in the gable ends, we looked at some of the other precedents in the area and decided to use the half timbers, hence the Tudor revival aspect of it, and using oyster shells in the stucco rendering. So as you come through the carriage house, you see sort of ahead of you an arched entrance, which from our manor came from Folly Farm, which was by Lutyens as well in England, and then got translated through the process at Overstrand Hall and eventually even at Walden Manor Estate, which was the original buildings here, which many of which are no longer exist. That had the half timber and the stucco rendering. It had the arched opening. It had the court, inner court in a U shape at Walden Manor. And so we looked at all of those historic images as well.
The Walden Manor that doesn't exist anymore?
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
These are the
just checking.
photographs of Walden
this
Manor.
enormous
So you came
place.
into the, right,
Okay,
exactly.
but that's not what's there now, right?
No.
Well, it's
Good.
the guest
Just
house
wanted to-
that was then added on.
Right, that was the beach house, is that
Right,
correct?
yes, exactly.
And it was added on to in the 30s or something? It's been mangled.
And even later.
It's enlarged. It doesn't really, okay.
Right. No, I'm just giving you an example of
Okay, I'm just trying to
that
get the,
architecture.
figure out.
Also, some of the others in the area where we employed that also on Halsey Neck in a project, and we have photographs of on a dune in East Hampton as well. And as you come through then, you have the large arch with the bay window, the gable ends with the oyster stucco, and a shingle style, sort of rather picturesque gathering of forms and roof lines and windows that have been both done as dormers and in running dormers, both as singles and also in groups. Again, all reminiscent of the style of the shingle style and Tudor revival aspects of village architecture in this village and your neighboring villages. Going around through to the back of the house, we've moved, the pool is on the ocean side of the house, and there is a terrace as well and a pool house. All just a further elaboration on the language as I set forth in the sort of my description to date of the front of the house.
Tim, could you just spend a little bit of time comparing this to the original plan, just for a few seconds, in terms of square footage and location and style? I have a...
Right, well, the first design was sort of the antithesis of this, in that it came more out of the Georgian revival aspects of the shingle style, and was completely symmetrical, and was very balanced and harmonious, but came forth as a single block, which I think caused some disturbance in that it was less visually broken down and was stronger in terms of its volumetrics. So it was also pushed very close to the ocean, and the pool was put on the land side of the house.
Just if I may interrupt for 1 second, the original house the original house was set back 100 feet from the crest of the dune. Currently, we're at 185 feet from the crest of the dune, primarily at the request of the neighbor to the far south, the Mangers. But also, the original house was just shy of 18,000 square feet. What we have before you now is
14 and a half.
14 and a half.
Yes,
Which is still well under the GFA.
What we really wanted to do was also place this house, listening to the neighbors, in the space between their main residences, so that the cones of vision across were not obstructed. I know it's always a bit of a shock when people have lived next to open land, essentially, for some time, but it is... We tried to be respectful with the placement of that house.
Specifically, the southeast corner of the principal residence is 121 feet from the Mangers, and 130 feet from the Michaelchecks. So what we were trying to do was achieve a balance between the two, and thus scale and proportion between the two existing houses. Of course, this house is 61 feet above sea level. That house is 63 feet above sea level. Manger and Michaelcheck, we're at 52 feet above sea level.
And if you look at the complexity, which is several reasons why I think building the entire zone is helpful here, is I think there is sort of a lovely cadence as the buildings move across the site, in that you get the two that are out at the dune crest, as it were, and then there is this movement of all the buildings. So we tried to create that. I know we talked about the drive before. It's the same kind of thing we were trying to do with the drive on the property, so that there is a meandering. And when you just sort of, as a bird's eye view, look at this site, you don't feel like anything's being lined up like a subdivision. You know, there is a natural flow to all of the buildings. And if you look at the roof lines of all of the buildings here, which is what stuck out so much, I think, to everyone when we were sort of in the Georgian revival aspect, was it was very, block-like. Apartment block even, I think, maybe came up. And now when you look at it, all of the roofs and all of the dormers and all of the gable ends sort of dance across the landscape. So there is a harmonious sort of blending, both in terms of how the cadence of the mass is placed on this whole sort of corner of the village, and also they all seem to embrace a sort of what I'd call an energetic roof lines that break up the massing and forms of the house.
And not to be forgotten is the fact that Mr. Schleifer, Mr. August, and Mr. Ayers
you can remove this if you'd like to, because it does
very, very generously purchased the lot due south of Mr. Ayers, correct? For a sum of approximately $13 million, and did, by way of a conservation easement, sterilize the development of that. So, in other words, in terms of scale, proportion, sense of place, adding to the open feeling.
Right.
So where you could have had three houses with a potential build-out of 45,000 square feet, and this is significant, 1, 2, 3, three houses with a total build-out of 45,000 square feet. We're now talking about two homes with a total build-out of about 19,005, 5 and 14.5.
I almost feel that also it's very hard from you guys up there and down here, if one got down into this model and sort of at eye level and looked
I'm
through
sure
it.
they're not that smart.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, gosh. I think there's a movie about that.
Downsizing.
That's right.
So I'm here tonight to offer you all a downsizing
Get rid
experience.
Small, right?
Are you going to just put pictures of this model in the record? We're not going to fold that up and put it in the
No,
file?
they bring it every time. It's quite a job. So, how tall,
52 feet above sea level.
52?
Madam Chairman. Yes.
And
This
Mr.
is-
Ayers' house is how
Mr.
tall?
Ayers' house is about the same. You recently approved a house on 456, which is 57 feet above sea level.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's important. The house due east of the smaller house, the guest house, which was under construction now, you can see it, is
Fairleigh.
57.
Yeah.
That's 6
It
Fairleigh.
just happens to be in Fairleigh, which is higher up,
It's 50
isn't it?
it's 57.
Yes,
By the way, it's
okay.
also 5,500 square feet on an acre. This is 5,066 on 3 acres.
A historic area.
And then Mr. and Mrs. Michaelchek's house is 63 feet above sea level, and Mr. and Mrs. Manger's house is 61 feet above sea level. We're at 52 feet above sea level. Did you want to?
I don't know if I've said enough. I don't want to be verbose. I can start,
Perfectly
you know.
fine job. Do you have anything else to tell us?
Well, we did want to have Joel Snodgrass, our historic consultant, come up, unless there were other comments that you...
No, I think I'm sure you'll have
I've asked some
questions.
questions.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll have questions,
Joel?
but
Come up and introduce yourself.
Excuse me. Chairperson Stevenson, members of the board, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight.
You should say your name, Mr. Stein.
Oh, I did.
Okay.
Again, Joel Snodgrass, Street Preservation Services. My background is in historic preservation and architectural conservation. I've been doing that for 30 years, including having the pleasure of working on a similar board in the town of Huntington and being involved in these kinds of assessments. I'm trying to put things into context. I understand the sensitive nature of this and how this has been going on for a long time, and that I've had discussions outside where people have asked me, how do you feel about this? And the thing that comes to mind always is that in terms of trying to assess the appropriateness for something like this, whether in general or just in a historic district, it requires that you have to be as objective as possible. Of course, that's what the function of the board is, but I understand that there may be people who don't fully understand that principle and how it works. And what I'd render is that personal opinion has no place in this kind of discussion. That means how I may feel about a building personally really has nothing to do with it at all. It has to do with whether or not a structure meets compliance with your criteria. And of course you know that, but I'm saying this more as an outward statement to the general public and for anybody who's listening to this, is does this meet the criteria? My understanding of what came prior to this is that there was the standard review, there were the presentations made before this board, there was consideration, there was an assessment carried out by the board's historic consultant, Studenroth, and that the opinion rendered was one that after a discussion that the first submission, architectural design submission, was not appropriate for various reasons, that the redesign had made an attempt to meet compliance at a greater degree and successfully compromised to a place where it was felt it had done an admirable job in doing so. So, as I also understand it, that recommendation was considered by the board and helped it to feel as though that the effort was appropriate. It had gone to the degree of meeting satisfaction, and therefore it received approval by the board. Now, I also understand that this process is not one to say, well, you approved it the last time, therefore it's done. But I think that has to be obviously taken into account, that if the criteria were reviewed previously, then obviously it met agreement and endorsement for some reason. Now, I also understand that there has been a decision rendered that there was a discrepancy between whether or not size was used as part of the criteria in judgment what should be done. And of course, size in a dimensional sense is something that the Zoning Board of Appeals looks at in terms of compliance within the code. But I'm here to also point out that size, apparent size, in relative terms, is actually within the definition of scale in the criteria for this board. So size actually is incorporated into the process of review, but it's incorporated in terms of massing or form, and in a relational, comparative way between elements. It's typically between the scale of architecture and the human body. It's also between elements. It's between structures. It's between landscapes and so on. But you're really looking at size in the context of massing and form, but it's described as scale. So we're looking at the relationship, whereas massing is looking at a three-dimensional space, and of course it has to consider size within that three-dimensional space. Scale is looking at the comparative relationship between those forms, those massings. So I wanted to start with that, and of course I can quote all sorts of things here between the code and the criteria and the guidelines and Zach's report, but it seems to me that we're trying to get back to that understanding of scale as a reflection of comparative or relative size in comparison to other things. And of course, you've just heard descriptions about the heights being reduced, the redesign, elongating the building, telescoping the side wing as a projective telescoping but reduced massing, trying to bring down the scale and the visual appearance, which was noted in Zach's reflections the last time, that the apparent size is reduced by the use of the shingle style as a style all by itself just because of the way the characteristics of that style are expressed. And that means that that was embodied into the original design aspects of the shingle style, is that you tied the building to the earth by using a similar mass on the skin. You used asymmetrical placement of things. There was variety. There was an intentional process to bring this down. There's also the tie-in between the two buildings to speak to each other, both as the entrance building as a sort of setting the tone, if you will, coming into the second building, coming through the courtyard, which opens up the space but allows you to connect without it being the same blocking. I understand it has been moved back. I understand the pool was moved. I understand there were several things that were done, but I key back into one of the phrases that Zach used, which was it made an admirable attempt, basically, to comply. Now, I'll also say I doubt that there's ever a perfect design on any building like this, particularly something of this magnitude. This is a very large property. A lot of money was spent. This is yes, it's a sizable house. However, if you look at, pardon me, I left an important aspect of this back. And this is the part I think you all find enjoyable, and I'm going to hand this out, is the historic map. So the first one I'm giving is 1894 F.W. Beers. If you could pass those around. The second one is the 1916 Belcher Hyde. Pass that out. And the third one, 1926 Sanborn. And I'm going to do my best to turn this upside down. Thank you. 1926. You have to tell me if you need me to move these.
Label them. Yeah. You need one of them? That's the first.
Well, yeah.
On the boat.
1926, 1916, and 1894. The thing to note here is there's a traditional use of the site. 1894, if you look, can you see that? Yeah, okay. If you look, you can see that the properties, and this is described in the National Register nomination form for the Historic District in the Village of Southampton. These properties were developed as part of the estate movement. Large properties, large structures, confined in this case between the boundaries of the roads that surround it as a contiguous neighborhood. Now there's a question of what is a neighborhood. A neighborhood basically can be described as any collection of buildings that have similar character, but as far as the national guidelines are, it's really a contiguous development that speaks to each other, that has a similar flavor of architecture, similar setbacks, similar scales, and so on. And certainly, you could argue that much of the area around Lake Agawam and the ocean, as is described in the district as being a contiguous part that is south of the village, did speak to a similar flavor and similar usage. And you can see these are all large properties. The same exists in 1916, where, whoops, I'm sorry, pardon me. Many of these estates still exist, and I'll highlight, this is a little easier if we do it this way. And now you can see the property in greater detail, which, did I do it again? Yeah, I did, I'm sorry, pardon me. It's hard to read these upside down. If you look at this, actually, this is one of the, or I'm sorry, you go back to this, you can see this is the Thomas property, the dunes, that of course is well known. One single property, and of course this is the property, the subject property, or at least the east side of it is the subject property. It was one single parcel with the dunes and an ancillary building, which, by the way, and this is not just a small structure, if you see this in comparative size to what is built on Fairleigh, it's not a small structure. Note where its placement is. It's basically right in the area of where this discussion is taking place, of where the main house is. Roughly, if you look at it here, it's roughly right here. And my understanding is that there were buildings there until very recently that were taken down, and it seems as though there have always been buildings there since at least 1894. So the introduction of buildings onto the site is nothing new. That has been here for the last 100 years. Just as a side of interest, because people are always asking me how did this transform, you know, so this was fully Thomas in 1894. By 1916, it had been sold prior to the Wyckoff family. Of course, they built Walden Manor, which was a magnificent, very, very large structure. You notice it's subdivided. And then later on, it was then repurchased by the Wyckoff family, the southern side, to reunify it as back to a single parcel, which is when the beach house, the current Walden Manor, was constructed. So what struck me, and here it is, of course, what struck me is that what needs to be kept in mind is that not that constructing a new house means that you're carrying on tradition, but the reality is there is a tradition here for the construction of sizable buildings on large lots. This is nothing new. And so this is not a brand new concept that's being placed in the landscape. This is something that actually has gone on and was characteristic to much of Southampton, but certainly in this area of Southampton as estate architecture, with outbuildings and so on. And many of them with an intentional effort to provide an introduction to the space by going through a meandering landscape. In this case, it's a curvilineal drive, but coming into something that where it's hidden from view, and it expands and opens itself up as you get there. So, you know, the next thing I know in the code, the descriptions are trying to look at the relationship of a building to its own site, a building to its surrounding properties, and a building to its neighborhood, primarily. And if you take those three things and you break them down a little bit, you can say, well, does the building, what kind of relationship does it have in terms of its scale to its own property? Certainly, there's no argument that it meets compliance with zoning, because that's already passed. But if you look at it, again, in terms of its scale and effort to reduce itself through its architectural expression, then I think it is fair to say that it fits within the context of other buildings that are certainly here. Certainly there is an affording of spaciousness that exists that is very much in keeping with the buildings to the west. Now, the $64 million question, of course, is, well, then what's the relationship with the buildings to the right? Yes, it is a sizable building. I mean, I don't think anybody's disputing that.
Right or to the east?
I'm sorry?
To the right or to the east?
I'm sorry, to the east. Pardon me. Thank you. I think it would be not truthful to suggest that it's not a big building. But again, it has been designed in a way to try to reduce the impact of that. And that was a typical architectural skill in terms of trying to allow these structures to express themselves in certain ways, was to carry it out in different forms and with side wings and ancillary connections. So the relationship to the adjacent properties, yes, it is smaller. The properties on Fairleigh are lovely historic buildings. They're very interesting, particularly all the way to the end on the water. Very interesting structure. But it's more sizable. It's more vertical in its orientation. It is of a shingle style, but it's a little bit unusual in that it really expresses itself vertically with its massing, particularly the turret on the northeast corner. But you can see in both of these buildings the undulation of them, the expression of asymmetry, the use, obviously, of shingle skins and so on, that's actually a tie-in to this structure. So in terms of its architectural expression, there is actually more of a degree of compatibility than not. Now, in terms of sizing, we're not looking at the other structures which are placed here. The thing that's I think is interesting about Fairleigh, or at least the west side of Fairleigh, is that Fairleigh as a full contiguous parcel was developed as 5 individual buildings on that entire lot. And then they were later divided so that the west side became, I think there are 6 parcels now, 6 buildings on that now. So in fact, ironically, Fairleigh is now the anomaly within this larger area. If you look at the state development process, where these are all wide open areas, this is the only area on that section, this section, that's broken up that way. So strangely enough, that's the anomalous condition. And so trying to look at judging these structures compared to the west side of the property as opposed to the east side of the property is an entirely different discussion. It's 2 entirely different sets of circumstances and parameters. However, I would argue that what you see on the west is more in keeping with the rest of the neighborhood. So there is a degree of compatibility. Yes, there is a different sense of size and scale, but it's reduced, intentionally reduced, to try to mitigate any negative impact it has. Then, just to go back to sort of carry on what I was saying, is this idea of scale within the neighborhood and how it affects the overall area. Again, this is, what's the overriding principle of development in this area is the state architecture. It's sizable properties with sizable structures that have outbuildings, that have landscape elements, that have a contextual relationship and interplay with their surroundings. So in that sense, it is following somewhat the tradition of what had been there, which, again, to me speaks to the scale is working for the design of where it is. Now, there are not many places where you could do this, and there are not many parcels left that probably are of this available size, certainly not on the ocean. But if you're going to have the ability to build something like this, you need to have the ability to have that amount of land to do it, or at least to do it well. Otherwise, you really are jamming things in. So it's a question of where would you be able to appropriately carry this off? This is the type of parcel where that would exist. So, not to go on any further, as I said, I could quote all sorts of things here just to reinforce it, but I think you've probably heard enough of those. If you would like me to, I will. I would be happy to. But I think when I look at this, I think in terms of sort of the summary of what had occurred the last time, and I, of course, was not part of that discussion or presentation, but my sense is that, as I know this board does on a regular basis, there's very serious examination, very serious consideration, lots of discussion that will bring the overall text to an assessment normally by Zach, and then that helps to inform the board so that you all make the decision you feel is appropriate. Given that the last round provided an approval, I have to think in terms of, okay, so the stage was set in a positive way, or one that understood that compromise was made, certainly on the part of this, and compromise goes in both directions, obviously, it's necessary, but that the overall impression was, okay, there was effort to respond to direction and guidance from the board, and there was also an effort to take into account the input solicited from the neighbors to try to move this to a place of acceptability on both sides so that this could move on and move to a successful conclusion. So I think I'll stop there unless you have questions. And
Mr. Snodgrass, I just want to ask a procedural thing. These atlas maps.
Yes.
Were these referenced in your report that was submitted earlier?
No, I just got these today.
Okay. Could you, for the record, they're not really labeled. And
Yes,
it'd be good if
I'd be
you
happy
could submit
to.
a letter that
You know what I'll do is I'll
identifies and
label
labels
these again, and I'll submit these again, so you have them.
That's fine, but just make
And
sure they're somehow
should be
labeled and
stamped
referenced so
then.
we understand what they are.
I have a stamp.
Sanborn, Belcher High here.
So if you'd like, I'd be happy to label them and submit them again for stamping, so you have them in the file. Would that be what you need?
Since they're
Want me
already
to take those back?
stamped. Yeah, but I just can't get them to you. Sorry.
Yeah, of course, I'm happy to do whatever is helpful. So.
Are these the same copies?
Yes, I kept them separate. Very hard to.
Don, hold on. Does the board have any questions for Mr. Snodgrass? Not at this time.
Yeah, if you could just put a cover letter on them explaining what it is.
And just for my own, because I want to look at these, the first one was from 1898,
I will tell you right now, sorry.
the other one 1966, the other two are marked.
Try not to jettison
The
this.
the earliest one,
The 1916 Belcher Hyde
yes.
Atlas, and there's a
This is the
1926
early-
Sand.
Yeah, I'm going to put it on the ground. Otherwise, it's all going to jump.
18,
So this one is
That's good, we got it.
1926 Sanborn.
those are marked.
This is the 1916 Belcher Hyde. And this is the 1894 FW Beers.
1894? Okay, 595. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. One of the things the board wanted to see was perspectives from heading east on Gin as you go past the Bathing Corporation. So I have Grant Wellman from Aries Design to quickly take you through those things. Interestingly, when you're heading west on Gin, you're on the road so close up to the properties that you can't see the properties at all, but you can see them coming from if you're on.
What if you're walking down the road?
If you're walking down the road, if you're walking, even when you're walking down Gin heading
I walk there every
west.
day.
Yeah,
so-
no, I ride my
Sorry.
bike down there. You can't, the hedge is very high in relation to the hedges in front of Ayers. You can just see the top of the Ayers house, and the hedges on 20 and 18 and 16. If you're on the road, you can.
Okay, well, that's
Okay,
what you say, I don't agree with
Okay,
that, but that's
well, all
fine.
right.
Just checking.
Okay. So Grant, what we're going to show you right now, and we'll take it through quickly, is, Grant, you'll talk a little bit, there's a letter in the file, in the record, talking about the methodology. We take it with a naked eye lens, so you're actually seeing what the observer sees. And Grant will show you what we did to demonstrate what the house will look like, both in the summer and the fall, and before and after. It's important to note that the foliage that you see is taken in terms of size and number and species directly from the Ed Hollander plan. That's been confirmed not only by by Grant, but also by Mr. Hollander. Go ahead.
So John, everything you're presenting here is in a package you already
It's in a correct, yes, it's in the package.
So yes, good evening, Grant Wellman of Aris Design. So what we did is we went out to these 2 points along Gin Lane.
Lay it down if you can.
No,
without
then they
being
have to be
involved.
careful of the model.
So we're heading east here on the south side of Lake Agawam, and we took photos in 2 points. So one was from the pedestrian parking area, if you will, north of the Beach Corp, and we took one within Gin Lane itself, so the vehicular view. And then as I go through, I'll show you, we superimposed the residence and the vegetation to show those 2 views in various states of development and vacancy.
I'm sorry, and vacancy?
As it is now, vacant, a vacant lot.
Oh, okay, sorry.
And
Well, I'm trying to pay attention and understand, so it just makes sense to me. Go ahead.
So this is from Gin Lane, looking into the property east. And just quickly, you have the Ayers house here. You have the Michael Check house right here. And of course, Walden Manor. And I'll move on to the after shot now, which shows the proposed residence right here with the summer vegetation rendered in there. So what we did in order to achieve this is we had Bolgen and Associates mark up the corners of the building. This is after Squires and Holden staked out the corners. They built up to the ridge height, and we referenced those in our picture. Then we took the 3D model that was prepared by Gary Lawrence, and we matched that perspective up precisely and rendered in the vegetation per Edmund Hollander's plan. And so that's what you see here. And
Is it physically possible to lay them both next to each other without hurting the model?
can we move the model by chance?
Would also ask you if you could point to where the structure supposedly will be, or otherwise. Do you know which structure you're talking about?
That's what I was getting to. Same thing. I want to see the vacant versus.
By the way, just to move this, just a quick gap. These are actual photographs of the model. I'll hand them to Antoinette, and she can hand them around. So, as you can see, photographs of the model. And what's interesting, again, it shows the relative heights. These are to scale by Gary Lawrence, and I thought you'd also be interested to see, this is a view from the ocean. You can see in terms of scale, it's a much lower. But these are photographs of this model taken in my office.
Photographs of the model?
So-
It shows how
so-
high it is.
But it's also from ground level.
This one isn't, but
You get
the other one is.
you get more 3D.
Okay, here's a stamped one, let's not lose that.
Yeah.
There's real
Where's
law
the other
books
one?
behind it.
Scale, parent size.
But in relation to okay.
You show the difference.
So I think this will help to have them side by side here. So just starting at the top, we have what we're calling the before scene as it is now. The shot was taken in December, so you can see.
View A or view B?
This is view A.
Okay.
And again, this was taken in December, so the leaves have defoliated from all the deciduous trees. So this shot here in the middle is the after shot with the house that you see right here. And again, just going north to south, the Ayers house here,
So
the
Grant,
Michael
could you
check.
just describe where that is approximately?
I'm sorry, where what is?
Proposed houses on that?
The proposed house right here.
And that is next to the pole in a light gray?
It's behind the pole in the light gray, yes.
And can
Could you
you
do
bracket
it
the
You
dimension
can
of it?
see the gable end sticking out right here.
And the third one?
And so the third one, this is with summer foliage, but obviously we took this in winter. So just to be accurate to the photo, we're showing it as it would appear in the winter per Hollander's plan. So you can see these defoliated oak trees here. We have the proposed defoliated linden trees, London plane trees, and crepe myrtles.
So, Grant, you have photographs from two nearly identical vantage points.
Yes.
But there are no, and what I would love to see, vantage points from here, vantage points from here.
Yeah,
We took them, and if you're standing at that vantage point, you see hedge. We'll put them in the record, though. I thought it would be
I don't,
useless, but
we prepared those
we'll put 'em in.
studies. The only way to show it is to show what the outline of the house would be behind the privet hedge, but you would never see the house because the privet hedge is so high
whatever it
when you're
is.
that close up to
I
them.
think John gets it. He gets a lot of things.
No, I don't. You should explain it.
Okay, what I'm driving at is there's only a single vantage point when the right-of-way or the passage is a two-way street that extends several hundred yards, and what I'd like to see is pictures from this vantage point, okay, from...
Well,
Are you pointing to the water?
Ooh, John, I'm
Sir,
pointing
sir.
to the street, but I'm doing it upside down. So a vantage point here
So from
and a vantage point here.
Well, again, when we prepare those studies and we went through that exercise, just because of the way perspective works, even though the privet hedge is, let's say it's 8 to 10 feet high there, you're so close on Gin Lane that it just looks like a wall of green. You
We'll take
cannot
the
see
shot.
the
We'll put the
house.
shots in the record. We'll do it.
But as stated before, have the hedge show the outline of the structure.
We can do that.
So it indicates what the...
We can do that.
We can do that.
Assuming nothing.
Yeah.
But for any human,
You would have to step forward, he's not going to hear you.
Mr. Schleifer, if you had something to say.
Well, just from a common sense perspective, unless you're like the tallest person in the world, and I'm not even sure if the tallest person in the world could see the house from the street.
Oh.
We're trying to create a record, sir.
Yeah. And you know what? Landscaping, hiding things isn't really, we need to actually consider the size or the dimensions of a house in comparison to the neighboring properties. And hiding something with landscaping is not a consideration except for privacy, really. But in terms of the building from a public view, and, you know, there's no, if after a hurricane, have you been here? Can see everything. I can see everything now, pretty much.
Just before, we're going to have the appraiser come up, but before we do that, and thank you, Grant, and these are the large versions, but there are smaller versions in the file. I just wanted to, and it's dovetailing back into something that Joel was talking about in terms of sizes of house in the neighborhood. Now remember, the code says in relation to the property itself, the adjacent properties, and the neighborhood. Just taking a quick, it's very important. We took a lot of time to go to the building department and pull actual plans where we could get them. It's difficult because a lot of these homes have been untouched. They haven't been touched in a long time. But we're fortunate. Great down at the end of the block, Tim and actually I worked on the Harris house, again down at the end of the block. That's just so that the board is aware of that. That house, property number 12, is 15,850 square feet. And by the way, it has a guest house on a non-conforming lot. But it maxes out at much greater, the two of these max out at much greater square footage than what's being proposed.
What is the location of that house?
Excuse me? That's at the end of the block.
What block? Gin Lane?
This block. The Little Plains Beach. That's a block.
Corner of Little Plains Beach.
That's a block. It says adjacent properties, the neighborhood. Okay?
So John, what exhibit are you looking at here? Is this exhibit I in your submission?
Exhibit I? I'll tell you that in a second. Let me go on and we'll tell you what it is. Then we looked at another one that was very important. We looked at 56 Gin, which is about 4 lots away. 1, 2, 3, 4 lots away. Can't dispute that's in the neighborhood. 56 is labeled property number 10, and we were able to locate that through the actual records because there had been a Robert A.M. Stern. This actually house was before you very recently. Tim and I presented it. That's property number 10, 18,988 square feet. And what's important about this is because the opponents put in stuff in the record that was from something called the mass appraisals. And it turns out the numbers were way off. They had 56 Gin, and this is documented in our submissions at around 10,000 square feet. They also had the Michael Check's house at below, what was it? Had it around 8,000. Turns out it is 10,000, over 10,000 square feet. And then the Ayers house, which is property number 3 at 10,645, which is on 2 acres alone. Again, we have 24, which is about 5,000 square feet on 3 acres, and 14.5 on almost 4 acres. So I won't belabor this point other than to show you, as Mr. Snodgrass has said to you, and as we've maintained all along, it is a stretch to say that this is it's just not supportable by the numbers that this is a house that is out of character in terms of size, scale, massing, or anything. We've gone to great lengths through architecture and undulating the size of the house and the heights to make it so. And also, of course, very important, we've shown how this property was preserved by the applicant and his 2 neighbors, Mr. Ayers and Mr. August, who have also written very strong letters of support. Where is...
Whoa. Mr. August did not write a letter.
Yes, he did.
Some person representing some agent Isn't that right?
That is the owner of the LLC. It was procured from Mr. August by my office. The agent of the LLC, the owner, with Mr. August's permission, wrote.
The agent of the LLC?
It's a member of the LLC, the managing member of the LLC.
Of the August property?
Yes.
But Mr. August didn't write the letter?
It's not required.
None of it's required, Mr. Bennett, I understand that.
If the owner is an LLC, then the authorized signatory or manager of the LLC can...
And that person did not represent himself in that letter. He said he was an agent of Mr. August, I believe.
I'll stand on it. It's...
Okay, I'm just asking. It seemed peculiar to me.
It's not peculiar at all. It's done all the time.
Okay.
Your counsel will inform me of that. Mr. Lynch, if you could just give us your summary. I know you've been exhaustively gone through this, but if you could just give us your summary, given the lateness of the hour.
Certainly. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Michael Lynch. I'm a state certified real estate appraiser with offices at 15 Dewey Street, Huntington. I have testified before the planning board of the village, as well as the town of Southampton, village of West Hampton Beach, Architectural Review Board, town of East Hampton, etc. I have a copy of my CV. I can submit that. Sure.
So, a point of order, may I ask the chair when the appropriate time is to raise it?
Microphone, sir. I can't record it from back there. Thank you.
What are you doing? How are you? Good to see you again. Yes, I'm so sorry to interrupt these proceedings, and thank you very much for hearing me. This is a point of order. The criteria for the approval of a certificate of appropriateness is not related in any way to finances. An appraisal of this property, values, its impact on surrounding values, although perhaps interesting from a real estate sales viewpoint, is not a factor in a certificate of appropriateness. So hearing testimony and receiving a report concerning appraised values as to what something could be or wasn't and so on is really extraneous to these proceedings, and the introduction of testimony regarding appraisal shouldn't be accepted.
Madam Chairwoman, I would just submit that you haven't even heard from the party, so until you do, let's hear what he has to say, and then you will duly take into account whether...
Once he said it, it's on the record. I don't...
Whether anybody speaks...
You're allowed to say it. I don't think that it has, this sort of...
I think he...
Go ahead. How's that?
He can speak, and
we can listen. We can accept it or not. Okay. Please go ahead.
I'll try to be brief. I did prepare a report, my findings.
Is that report in the record?
We have copies.
Here.
I gave you a copy.
Okay. Just want to make sure. So as the board is aware, I'm here on the SH28 LLC application, which is a property comprised of 3.77 acres at 28 Gin Lane, 1,700 feet east of Little Plains Road and just east of the easterly shore of Lake Agawam. The proposal is to build a 14,561 square foot oceanfront residence. As Mr. Bennett indicated, we have prepared a display here that describes the surrounding immediate area of the historic district of the estate area of the village of Southampton, running from the easterly shoreline of Lake Agawam east to Little Plains Road. As was described, this property has design elements where it has a staggered roof line so as to protect the view sheds of the adjacent properties. As well, the applicant also owns, as was indicated, a one-third ownership of a lot immediately to the west along the easterly side of Gin Lane. So that's further going to protect the view sheds of the nearby residences. As was further indicated by Mr. Bennett and his expert that prepared this display, immediately to the abutting this property to the east is Fairley Road. There are a series of parcels that are substandard in nature. We're in the R120 zoning district. These parcels are primarily 1 acre plus or minus. Mr. Bennett went over the sizes of these homes with respect to their gross floor areas and how they exceed, given their substandard lot size, the gross building areas of these lots is far in excess of what is proposed for 28 Gin Lane. We're proposing a gross floor area of 8.9%, and these lots up and down Fairley Road all generally exceed that. In addition, 3 of the 4 lots along this area in the immediate vicinity of the applicant's proposed structure exceed the 52-foot ridgeline elevation. This proposed residence at its maximum will be 52 feet. 3 of these residences range anywhere from 52 feet up to 63 feet for the ridgeline height. So, and the last thing that's proposed, again, to protect the view sheds of the nearby properties, is that we're now pushing the home back an additional, I believe it's 93 feet from the original design. So again, all those measures are being carried out to protect the view sheds and the values of the immediate nearby residences. In addition, I didn't testify in this, but as far as 24 Gin Lane, the companion application from the applicant, he's proposing a guest cottage of approximately 5,000 square feet on a 3-acre parcel. That again is roughly half of what could be as of right built on that structure. So again, that's another measure that the applicant is taking out to protect view sheds in the area of not only the ocean but of Lake Agawam. In terms of the investment, Mr. Schleifer has put forth in these properties. With respect to 28 Gin Lane, he purchased the property back in December of 2015 for $40 million. There was added expense for raising the former residence that was on that property. The proposal for the new residence on that site, that 14,561 square foot traditional shingle-style residence, is estimated conservatively at $1,000 a foot, but more likely is in the area of $1,500 a square foot. So all told, he'll have an investment in this particular property of 28 Gin Lane anywhere from $57 million to $62 million, which would include, of course, landscaping, hardscaping, and other improvements that would be part of the luxury residence. In addition, at 24 Gin Lane, he'll have an additional 18 to 20 million invested in that property. That lot was purchased for 13 million, and again, with the proposed guest house and other improvements for that site, that estimate would be anywhere from 18 to 20 million. So these figures are in line with other oceanfront larger parcels in this area of Southampton. They're also consistent with the values of other homes in comparable areas of the village of East Hampton. And as far as the house itself, it is consistent, again, given its 3.77 acres with the other homes further east to Little Plains Road, as Mr. Bennett described. So all in all, the proposed for the new residence should have, given the measures that the applicant is proposing for this with respect to the staggered roof line, landscaping, and the open space that, again, that Mr. Schleifer does own immediately to the to the west would not pose any threat to nearby property values, especially given that the adjacent residences immediately to the west are all on substandard lots, many of which exceed the ridge line as what is proposed here, and have much larger gross floor area ratios. If the property were deemed too large by this board, and Mr. Schleifer was forced to build a smaller house, say anywhere from 10,000 square feet to 12,000 feet, the property values would drop by an appropriate value of at least $1,500 per square foot. So for every 1,000 square foot of reduction in this proposed home, you'd have a loss in value of anywhere from $1 million to $1.5 million. So again, it is a property that's proposed with a scale that is in keeping with the other homes up and down Gin Lane of the larger parcels. And I feel that this proposal, should it be built, will not pose any threat to nearby property values. If anything, it'll only enhance the property values up and down this area of Gin Lane in the historic area. So at this point, I can answer any questions if the board may have any.
If I may, I just would ask that either Mr. Bennett or Mr. Lynch, not at this time, but I would suggest in writing that you just provide us with a little guidance as to what relevance that this report, I see some relevance with respect to maybe your opinion as to real estate matters, but as to value, I'm a little confused, but I'd like to see whatever you can provide us as to relevance to the standards under Chapter 65 that the board has to apply.
If I may, I'll flesh it out further, but just, the board is also reviewing the matter under Chapter 116, as you're aware, and the standards in 116-1 talk about the economic well-being of private property. Not only has Mr. Lynch testified as the detriment to the Schleifer property, but he's also testified and given a report on the fact that there will be no negative impact upon the surrounding property. So it is quite relevant. But I'll
Thank you.
Is that all, Mr. Lynch? Anything else, Mr. Bennett?
No, I would just ask that you familiarize yourself with all the submissions, and if you have any questions,
That's what we asked from the beginning.
they're all cumulative. They're all cumulative. They've all been in the record. Mr. Schleifer, do you have something you want to say?
I really appreciate you all taking the time to hear this, and look forward to, as soon as you all think that you have everything that you need, that you make a decision that you think is right on this property. And we've tried really hard over the last 3+ years to listen to all the input of this board and our neighbors to propose something that we feel like is a huge amount of compromise and addresses all of the issues, 99.99% of the issues that were brought to our attention in terms of the size of the house, the location, the making sure that it fits in this historical district, and we strongly believe that this does that. And so really appreciate you taking the time to hear this, and look forward to you all making a decision. Thank you.
Anything else?
Not at this point.
So,
I have a few questions for Tim.
of course you do, Rob. Go ahead.
Well, I'd like to address the architecture.
Yeah, let me
if I
just
could.
grab my board down here.
Sorry, I wanted them to finish their presentation.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I don't have my model. Do you need the model?
Now, do you have a set of plans handy?
Yep.
You could refer to?
There's got to be some here.
It's 24, 28. Yeah. Do you want it for 28?
For 28. We're here.
This is 24. It is 24.
Here, wait.
You'll need to face us.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Need the model?
And I'm going to refer to 200 and 201. We don't need the model anymore.
Okay, sure.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper.
200 and 201.
Yeah, primarily.
Okay.
So I have some questions on the windows. And I've had some concerns, but also some questions. Can you talk to me on the west elevation, the 4x5 windows, and then also the 4x3 and 4x2 windows that are on, I believe, talking on, let me be very specific for you. The 4x5s are on the second floor.
In the center dormer?
Dormer, yeah.
Yeah.
How tall are those? I mean, they're 8.5, 9 feet, I believe.
I need a scale.
It's not so much like the,
Engineer scale.
they just stick out, and I'm wondering, I don't see a precedent elsewhere in the house for, what's the design, what's your design by putting in windows that large?
Light and view, it would have been driven by that.
All right.
There's also a certain, to me, and again, I take it all
The way it's
the way it's meant. I mean, there's a certain skewering and a strength that we need out of that dormer. To us, the size and scale of those windows sort of, because if you notice the window underneath and then the two little porch infills, there's a certain centering that's going on from us. But
you get some of that from the shiplap, and the size of the windows relative to the exposed shiplap feels a little out of whack, actually. It looks...
They bother you.
They bother you.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I get that you want that dormer to have some heft.
It's not something that would, it's not to me the critical elevation of the house.
And I don't want this to be...
Can we look at it then? We'll look at it.
Okay. I don't want this to be, some of these aren't criticisms, most of these are really just questions. So I'll try to make them more question-like. I had a similar question on 201 of the window in the 3x5 window in the tower. It's a stairwell vestibule, I think.
Right, it's there, that's the stair.
1.5-story window.
Right.
I appreciate that that's part of sort of a tower form that's trying to break up all the masses. You described the different use of masses and some asymmetry and some unexpected moments.
No, I'm just kidding.
It just, I'm to be honest, as much as anything on this window, I'm concerned about the size of the panes. And I feel as though there's just a lot of different pane sizes going on. Some of that, I wouldn't want them to be uniform. I like the
Right, I wanted it to break up, exactly. So we get the very small sort of running sort of casements down at where the roof drops down. And then we do sort of get the largest at that window. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, and similar size panes over in the next pediment to the south on that east elevation as well.
Yeah.
In both one of the first floor window and one of the second floor windows.
It's sort of a way of drawing attention without putting an arch on it, or without doing something that in my office appears to be more fussy and decorative. Like.
Okay.
Which.
Does the explanation work well? Right.
Yeah. These are just, I'm trying to understand. This is my first time, I've looked at them 2 months ago, but this is my first time having a chance to discuss them. So I'm trying to understand some of the rhythms, because it is a big building. And the idea of breaking it up into different forms and having both the balance of some rhythm to it, but something unexpected. Because
you want your eye to jump to, as opposed to if it gets too uniform, which we often do get on a smaller house where we want every pane of glass with great ends to be exactly the same, because you want to sort of do the opposite. You want to make a small thing seem like it has a more stature. Whereas in this case, we really want you... In certain designs, this would have been a Palladian window someone would have put in there, which is not what an architecture that we like to do. So instead, we sort of monumentalize the window so that it stands out in that way.
In the drive-through, so on the north elevation as you approach on the driveway,
Yeah.
there are what look like little mini turrets, little guardhouse windows on either side. Did you consider making those dormers, or are those functional, or are they really meant to be
They are
decorative and
dormers.
whimsical?
They are dormers, and they will let light into the...
That has a strong antecedent, doesn't
Right,
it?
it's
Yeah.
coming off of the Lutyens example here. So they are dormers, as it were.
That's just sort of a signature of that aspect of the house, we thought.
Okay. I think that may be it with respect to windows. Couple other questions. What is the color of the shiplap? Is it white like
White.
the rest of the trim? Okay. I don't think I saw on the plans called out white next to any of the shiplap, but it's the same trim color for the windows and for the fascia boards? And
Correct, and the half timbers, yes.
Thank you. The arches on the south elevation, can you walk me through what I'm seeing there on the trim? It looks segmented, looks articulated like an insect leg?
Yeah, it's like, there's a little bit of a shouldered arch, so it's a, I don't know if I have the historic picture of it, but there's a shoulder detail. It's a sort of arts and crafts inspired detail or Tudor revival.
Like a band that sort of goes through the
Exactly.
trim board? Okay, all right. Thank you. The roof lines, several of the roof lines have flares in them. For most of them, those flares occur toward the bottom of the roof line.
Right.
For the roof line that's over bedroom number 3, the flare occurs near the top. I'm looking at the east elevation on 201, and it looks like that flare occurs at the top. Is that because that's the same absolute level as the flares on the rest of the roof lines? So if I'm looking at the east elevation, the very right or north side of that, not the garage structure, but the main form that comes in after the connector, looks like there's a little flare about 4 feet down from the top of the ridge line. Yes, back right there. It looks like there's a flare down here.
Let me see, it's too hard for me to see it upside down.
So it's right here.
Yes, yes, yes.
Now that flares near the top.
Right.
Whereas other flares occur near the bottom. But are they at the, do the flares occur at the same absolute level?
Yeah, I believe they are occurring at the same level.
Okay.
Or close to it.
How would you describe, is that an arts and crafts feature to have that sort of flare?
And again, what we are also trying to do is sort of look like it got added onto, that it wasn't one consistent language, which is that therefore you get diversity in windows, you get diversity in hips versus gable ends, you get different heights, the building steps down in height as it goes down, so that it gives you that dance across of your eye that hopefully it's a fake history.
Okay. I'm working still to digest all the forms on this, so this is helpful for me in digesting those forms. I guess my last question is sort of a comment, but also a question. There are 2 chimneys, and I get a feeling that when you go north from the main portion of the house toward the garage structure, that there's in some ways a little less sort of detail or breakup, for instance, of the roof line. There's a very long roof line in there of about 65 or 70 feet. One roof line. There's no, there is a shed dormer on the west side, which we talked about earlier, but no chimneys in there, and it feels to me as though there's maybe a detail missing in there, and that's, those are...
Are we looking here? Is this what you're...
Yeah, looking there. Yeah, from there to the north, to the right, actually. It's that long form where the shed dormer's on the other side with the shiplap. And just interesting to me that the northern 2/3 of the house doesn't have a chimney structure or other architectural feature toward the top. There's a couple of dormers, but they kind of blend in. And
Right, well, these are these little flat roof dormers that sort of stick out. And again, they also move in that this one's higher than that one. Yeah.
Was there any thought to doing anything else decorative on that northern end of the house? I apologize. While I saw some of the previous form on videotape, I've not looked at the previous plan, so I don't know how this differs from the original plans. Was there ever a thought of adding in that element, a chimney top element?
No, but doesn't, probably because we didn't have a need for a fireplace there, so, and I'm not a cupola person, so.
Okay. All right, those are my...
I think he's just saying in this zone.
Okay.
If there were more.
No, I would just comment, I'm still also trying to digest on the east elevation, the very southern portion. So you go from the shed...
I'm sorry, I'm going to just because the thing, if you look at these, I don't know if you can see from there, but one of the houses we were using as the precedent, this very sweeping roof, and then you do get these, towards the bottom, the little dormer. There's a certain, even though there's a lot going on, that gives it a certain umbrella of simplicity over it, and I get nervous in Southampton or other places when I start seeing too many things going on up as sort of doodads and decoration, and so this already has plenty.
And I understand, I think, the use of the shiplap to try to bring in some variety and also yet some rhythm and consistency. The one place where I'm scratching my head on it, I know it's set back, but on the east elevation, so this is on 201, MHA 201, on the very left or southern end of the east elevation, just going down from the ridge line, you have a shed dormer with a couple of windows and the oyster shell insets, and then you come down to a loggia with the sort of arts and crafts gunstyle pillars and the shiplap behind it, and then you come down to something that starts looking a little bit almost Georgian with the trim there because there's not a roof over it. So I know I'm seeing a lot of things that in two dimensions that are actually in
right, because it's recessed. So often we'll use the shiplap on those recessed areas because the shingles don't weather the same way. Okay. And when you go outside onto those covered areas, it's kind of nicer to be in a painted white environment than it is in something that feels sort of dank and dreary.
Sorry.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Those spaces can get sort of creepy. I appreciate you actually
looking at
it.
Right, well, I'm going to look at it, but
no. But you
so we'll look at that one.
You've got bedtime reading.
That one set of windows.
I'll look at all those things though, just to because I
can put them
it's
down
fresh eyes. Yeah,
that'd be wonderful.
Not at all adverse to that.
Is there anyone else who would like to
Funny,
speak?
we're talking arts and crafts to a $50 million project.
Arts and crafts can be expensive.
It's a little like an oxymoron. It's okay. I have no comments on it.
Anyone?
I have no comments on
Free for all.
it.
You have no comments on
No
that.
comments.
Does anyone else have comments? Step forward.
Anybody else have any comments?
I don't think we do about this, but we have some other comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard Handler, attorney. I don't know whether a copy of the Judge Pastoressa's decision has been entered in the record. I think it's relevant,
Yes, it
and
is.
if it is, fine.
Thank you.
Mr. Bennett, in response to a question concerning the importance of the appraisal, indicated that Section 116 review was relevant to this application, and that the appraisal should be considered because Section 116 of the zoning code was a factor. And if I can, I'd like to quote from page 2 of Justice Pastoressa's decision in response to Ferrara, which was a case that this board relied upon and the court determined was not relevant to proceedings concerning a certificate of appropriateness application. And in that decision, the justice says, Farrar is not in a historic district, and that review was based upon Village Code Section 116-33. And he goes on to say, and this is, I think is quite noteworthy, which does not include the same language or criteria as a historic district. So we have a finding from the judge in the prior case that held that 116 code review is not part of the criteria for historic district review. And assuming that the court's decision and opinion is to be respected, then if the reason to permit the appraisal to come in is because it's relevant to Section 116 review, based on the judge's decision, that appraisal would be irrelevant because Section 116 is not a factor in the court's review in any fashion with respect to this application. So I'd ask that the board consider that heavily. We've seen a lot of new information tonight. I look around and I see picture boards and storyboards and street views and new maps and composite pictures. There were letters, there were exhibits within the letters, 3 new maps. Perhaps there is a report from the preservation consultant which may or may not have been submitted. Perhaps there's a written report by the appraiser that may or may not be submitted. It seems like there is significant new details. Items that need to literally be examined, have to be copied, have to be evaluated in order to provide this board with an intelligent review and also to provide a formidable response or appropriate response at the next proceeding. The board, I believe that we would have comment at another hearing, but certainly I don't know if we'd be able to complete the entire review of these things by the next session. So I'd ask the board to perhaps put this over for a month so that the entire, all these new materials can be properly evaluated and responded to.
Who objects?
Just everybody quiet. I think there was more public comment. Did you have your hand up?
I did, but I'm going to rest on what Mr. Hanlon just said.
I have a question that has to do with the applicant's statement that that you said that you were 99.9% have met the demands, and I don't even want to use that word, but anyway, have accommodated the neighbors 99.9% on both size, on size, location, and fit and compatibility. It would seem to me that in as much as this has taken well over a year to get here, that may or may not be their assessment. While I will make my decision and my vote is one of the community in general. I mean, that's how I see my primary role as representing the community. The impact of the neighbors, though, is important, and this board does try to promote good neighbors and neighborliness, and so I question, not in the sense of doubting, but at some point, and maybe it's next session, and personally, I don't think this needs to take a month. I think we've got 2 weeks. Everybody can have time to do it. I'd like to move things forward as well. But help me, somebody figure out, and maybe both sides, whether it's your attorneys, whether it's you individuals, help me bridge this gap that I'm not seeing. And again, my view is from a community perspective, but in as much as the word community has its base in Latin and has to do about common and people. Help me bridge this gap, folks. And I don't know what the procedure is, whether if you want to, what's that?
You're just making a statement, or you're asking a question of somebody?
Yeah, I'm asking a question of both the applicant and the neighbors. If they choose to speak. If not, we're going to be coming back in 2 weeks, and people can present their case at that point. But But I do have a question of the applicant, who made a statement that he's 99.9% there, and in the face of opposition, I'm just having a hard time. So perhaps you can put more color into it, Scott.
The initial proposal that we made to the air a long time ago, that was not a or let's talk about the new proposal.
Yeah, exactly. Because we're way beyond that.
Absolutely. So on the
okay. And really, from my perspective, Scott, you should know that has no bearing at all. We are looking at this application as a new application, and so your statement that you're 99.9% in accord with the neighbors and they are with you has to do with this application, not where you've come. So let's let him.
He may not have understood that.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Ruben.
The current proposal is as far from one of the primary houses as you can make it. There are two properties, right? The Mangers house, which was a beautiful house, and the Michaelchek's house, which is also a beautiful house. And so ultimately, what I believed and believe is the optimal compromise to be neighborly and common is to try to position our house as far from the Mangers house as possible, and also as far from the Michaelchek's. And so that is why the current design has the home so far off the dune relative to what is zoned, and puts essentially the pool, it goes dune, pool, home, in order to create the farthest separation. And relative to the size of the property, I believe this is the smallest logical proposal. It's a property that in aggregate, I believe, is zoned for something like, is it 48,000 feet of internal space?
All three properties combined would be, yes.
Okay, or even just these two properties, it's 30.
Only talk about them separately.
Perfect. So separately, on the primary property, it's zoned for 18,000, and we're proposing 14,500, and so I view this as enormous compromise. And I believed when we initially put it forth, a little over a year and a half ago, that it was not going to have, that it wouldn't have objection. And I strongly believed then, and I believe now, that it represents enormous compromise, which was the goal with which it was designed. It was the mandate for the team. And I believe it is what was and has been achieved. And so, when I said 99.9 or 2 nines, I'm not sure whether I used 1 or 2. You have a house that's as far away from the two houses that it will be closest to as possible, and as small as would be logical for a gorgeous 3.7 acre property on the water on Gin Lane. And we tried to make it, and then by retaining one of the world's best designers who had done properties within 150 or 200 yards, several. I wanted to do that because he knows exactly what to do here to, in my opinion, to make it real awesome for everyone who walks by every day, whether there are hurricanes or not. And in keeping with compromise, we made sure that, me and some of the neighbors made sure that there would be as few homes ever built in this area as possible. And in aggregate, I view all that as enormous compromise.
You have to address us, not them, please.
I view all that as enormous compromise, and so I don't know what else to do. And so since I don't know what else to do, to me, once you get to what else can you do, that's 99.99%. And then
Okay.
And then what I'm hoping is that the community will come the last 0.01%.
Okay.
So I inferred from what you said that you were in agreement with the neighbors and the neighbors were in agreement with you. But as you stated, this is your belief, because there's many times you use the I as opposed to we. So I understand what your attempt was, and I appreciate that attempt. I suspect that that's not necessarily shared with your neighbors, because otherwise I might have heard we in there, and maybe, whether you guys choose to do that or not, that's
Totally.
That's it.
That said, sorry, really good point. We met with the neighbors on a number of occasions in different places, including with their architect, and including last week, and 2 years ago, and the proposal that we made, I believed, and was going to make the community, including my neighbors, happy. I fully believed then and now that this design, which was totally different, it's really different. We listened hard about massing, how it would be, it's a historical spot. It's like one of the, this area, I think it's one of a really historic area. And so it's really important that whatever home goes there is not overly massed, is not odd shaped, it's like that it's really appropriate. And we listened because those were the terms that our neighbors told us. And that I believe the architect team achieved. And then some.
Okay, thank you.
I hope it's short. We're getting tired.
Jeff Braden for the Manger and Michael checks. It would be very helpful to us if we could get a commitment out of the other side to make copies of everything that they've presented tonight. There are a lot of documents here that we haven't seen and haven't had a chance to within, say, by Friday.
Tomorrow.
Yeah. Gee, I wish they could have been that prompt on the documents that came into my office today.
Mr. Bragman, they seem to be offering to
That's
do
great.
that.
I accept.
Thank you.
I just want to say one thing about compromising. Generally, when you think your position is 99.999% there, that's not really somebody who's looking to compromise. And what I hear from Mr. Schleifer, and I know he's frustrated by the process, is that he feels the big compromise that he made was that design change that came in 2.5 years ago when they went from that sort of office-looking building to the courtyard building. But since then, there's been almost no change in the plans. And there's been almost no change in the square footage of the plans. There's been almost no change in the length of that west wall that stretches 30-plus feet from the property line. There's been no change in the definition of that west wall that faces the neighbors. And, that to me does not suggest a neighbor that's trying to compromise with his neighbors or who's listening to his neighbors. And I think that's something of the sense that we have from him. And the other thing that I find amazing is that it seems like we're refighting the same battle. Because, we went to court and got a definitive ruling from the court that the size of this building was a relevant factor, which this board, not the same composition of this board, assiduously avoided applying under the direction of its then chairman, Mr. Highsmith, who actually was strict enough on the subject that he told us that certain words couldn't be spoken. We couldn't utter the word size. We couldn't talk about comparative size. And yet, today, we hear from counsel and the applicant, they keep wanting to remind you that their as-of-right build is whatever the square footage was, which is a complete denial of what the court decided, because the court explicitly told them that their references to the GFA requirements of zoning were irrelevant to the standards of Chapter 65 review. And, you know, today my sense of what I hear is, oh, let's hurry up and get this done. What's the matter? This is the same plan. It ignores the fundamental fact that occurred, that a court looked at what they had produced and looked at this board's decision and said, you completely ignored the applicable law, you tainted the record, you wouldn't let witnesses fully testify, and those of you who were here, I guess Mr. Coburn is the only one who wasn't here, experienced that, and we experienced that. And so when they get up and say, excuse me, I want to...
No, I'm going to let you finish. I just want to stand behind you so
okay.
I can say something now.
Okay. And the fact of the matter is that I hear the same argument today, and some of the arguments are using the same mathematical formulas. You heard this from the appraiser. Oh, the Mangers house is a higher percentage of lot area, of buildable, of square footage to lot area. A calculation that was created by council, which is deliberately slanted in favor of a property that has a large lot area, because if you have a 3-acre property and you put 14,000 square feet on it, you may come out with a smaller percentage than the Manger house because it's on a much smaller property. And it makes mathematical sense, but it doesn't make any visual sense. And this case is about the visual sense of this proposal on the property. And so for them to rush us and say, let's get on with it, we've seen the plans before, it ignores the fundamental fact of what we've been fighting for, and that is that a proper analysis of the stuff that you're seeing was never made before, and we were prevented from making it before. And that's why we need time. That's why we want you to take time, because these percentages that they're pulling out, or the fact that they're comparing height above mean sea level, is a comparison that does not convey the visual impact of what they're proposing on this lot or its presence in the neighborhood. And I see the same kind of attempt to sort of soft soap the thing. I'm looking at these pictures that they produced. Are these guys professional photographers? No. How tall is the person whose height perspective they were purportedly representing? How far away from that property line did they shoot that photograph? What was the lens there? Why is there vegetation that blocks it out? I thought the chairman made an excellent point that, we don't evaluate the visual impacts of buildings by how well we can hide them. You have to look at what this building really is, and everything they're talking about is an attempt to distract you. The meandering entrance under an arch. What does that have to do? Did anybody here tonight utter the word 214-foot long solid wall along the property line? Did you hear anybody refer to the length of this building? I thought we approached it when Mr. Coburn was asking about some of the roof detail. I liked that, because he was pointing at that roof and the mass of that roof. Even when their expert got up and was talking to you about how the roof line is varied and again, he repeated the same argument we fought against and the court explicitly rejected, that you can't consider size, that size really is massing. That's what he told you tonight. I have notes on it. That's not correct. That is a misrepresentation of what the standards are. And we want to take our time, because we have fought for 2.5 years to get your ear in a forum where we were allowed to say the words that are in your statute. And Mr. Highsmith, I remember when I read you the law, and you rejected it to my face, and I read it to you and said, this is your standard, and you went, we can't look at size. So yes, we need some time. We need this presented in an orderly way. And we need you to apply the standards of Chapter 65 and do what the court told you to do. That decision that we got is not high praise for the way this board operated, and I know you can do better. I'm not personally critical of the individuals on this board, but it was not an endorsement of the procedure under which you were reviewing it. I'm sorry if I'm going on too long for you.
It's not that you're going on too long. I think you're giving...
Well, Mr. Bragman, I think what you've stated before is that you need additional time.
I need additional
and
time.
I would suspect that you're going to address everything you just did in whatever writings or experts as you want to submit.
But we need
Thank
to
you.
do it in an orderly way, and we need to get these exhibits in. We can't have exhibits delivered to my office the day of the hearing or the Friday before and give you any kind of a coherent response to it. So please give us the time and understand that we want to apply the law as it should have been applied the first time and wasn't. And that's going to take some doing. We have a team too. Thank you.
Okay. State your name, please.
Charles Manger, Chairman Stevenson, and the other board members. I would actually just like to make a comment that I will give you my word that as a principal involved in this, that I will continue to work with the neighbor and try to come to an amicable resolution that would, I think, would solve this for everybody. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add?
Thanks. All right, thanks.
Mr. Bennett, are we adjourning till the next meeting?
Sure.
Positive, good positive note.
He's requesting it.
I will make a motion that we adjourn the application for 28 SH 28 LLC at 28 Gin Lane for all purposes to our next meeting.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
And
Having a
may
motion to
I
close.
make a motion that we close this meeting of the Architectural Review, Historic Preservation Architectural Review Board on January 28th, 2019?
I second the motion. Aye. Aye. Thank you.